From the dinner break. Thank you, everyone. And we are in continuation in Outcome 1, Health Policy, Access and Support, Cross-Portfolio Indigenous Matters. And I think we're going to Senator Ruston first.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about mental health before I handed the call over to Senator Pocock, so if we could go back to that. Hi, so I'm just going to the 2025 Productivity Commission inquiry report into the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement. So I'm just interested, the Productivity Commission recommended the formalising of the National Mental Health Commission's role as an independent entity for assessment and reporting. So the Commission has been moved into the department as of the last 12 months. So I'm interested in, and maybe this is a question for you, Minister, what the government's specific response is to the recommendation in relation to this finding of the PC.
Senator, perhaps let officials answer while I get some information for you. I'm just flicking through some documents,
sure.
And I'll get an answer for you from a government point of view. But
sure.
In terms of the process and where we're up to, I think
well, it sort of really was more
Ms.
around
Devlin might have an answer for you.
That specific recommendation. The report also recommended that the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement be extended for a further year. So keen, Minister, to understand if the government supports that recommendation, and if it does, when will that agreement be formalised and announced, given the criticalness of it as difficult. I'm happy for you to take a bit of time to come back on
sure.
that.
Otherwise, I think Ms. Devlin has some information for you.
I can confirm, Senator, that the Minister has written to his state and territory counterparts to offer a further extension, and so that will, once they agree to that, that will cement that recommendation.
Okey-doke. And do you have any information in relation to the independence of the NMHC?
So, as you would appreciate, there was extensive consultation undertaken with the sector and others on the potential design of the future commission, and the independence of it was obviously canvassed during that, and it's now for government decision making.
So, in terms of the commission itself, I'm just wondering, can we identify any national mental health or suicide prevention outcome indicators that have improved in the last 3 years?
I'm not sure we have an assessment. It's Gavin Matthews first as the Secretary of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Division. I'm not sure that I've necessarily got an analysis of all of the indicators on me, Senator, but we can definitely have a look into that and see. I mean, obviously there's many that have, there's a fairly wide range of sort of indicators and things that are measured, but I don't have on me an assessment of all of the indicators, but we can take that on notice for you.
Just sort of, given the seriousness of this, you'd like to think that if there had been any improvement, we would be knowing about it. So, do we know when the Commission first, the National Mental Health, Suicide and Prevention Evaluation Framework, when it first applied to a live program under the agreement?
We have a range of, so it would be influencing many of the evaluations that we are doing now. We have a large number of evaluations of existing programs and things that would be underway at the moment. So I think that was, launched about a year or so ago and will be used to influence lots of the evaluations that, particularly the ones that we would be doing of some of the programs that we run in the in the Commonwealth. Again, we can probably, if you want some examples of that, I think we could quite easily find you some examples of what we've done with that.
Yeah. So how many,
actually making it, live and breathe.
Yeah, sure. How many evaluations have been completed under that particular framework?
I don't have that. We'd have to go away and check. And also, if we needed to look, would you looking at just the Commonwealth or states and territories as well? Because that would otherwise we'd have to go and request that from the jurisdictions. Okay,
because it would also be interesting to understand how the findings of that evaluation are influencing the commissioning of new program design, and as much as it'd be lovely to have a heap of positive indicators. I'm sure there are probably
absolutely.
some that are negative as well,
Yep.
and how they're influencing that design. So what are the current levels of lived and living experience representation on governments, bodies and advisory groups, etc., associated with the agreement?
So we have obviously we have 3 lived experience peak organisations. So we have the Mental Health Carers Association, and then the Mental Health Consumers Alliance. So we have, and then the Indigenous Australians Lived Experience Centre. So they're the 3 that have been stood up over the last year. They're involved in what's called the Mental Health and Suicide Senior Officials Group, MIPSO, that sits underneath the Health Ministers and Health Chief Executives Forum, and so they're included in those forums. And then we also have some representation of the lived experience group members that are involved in that process as well. So we have a range of lived experience peaks built into those processes that we run from a governance point of view, and then of course we have wider contact with a broader set of obviously lived experience peaks and stakeholders, and things like Suicide Prevention Australia, Roses in the Ocean, those sorts of organisations that also bring in lived experience into what we do.
So is it the lived experience, sort of input, lived and living experience input into those groups that advise the outcomes of the agreements, has that changed much over time? I mean, have we seen an increase in lived and living experience, or has it remained static, gone backwards?
Look, it would probably as an opinion more than it's a factual thing. We'd need to go back and check from a factual point of view, but I would say that it is an increasing part of the landscape. There isn't much that we do now where we don't have some engagement with the lived experience peaks. We meet with them regularly. For example, having established particularly the 3 core peaks, we have very regular ongoing discussions with them. And I think for most of the policy areas that we're working to develop on, we usually have contact and talk about them and involving them in what we do. For the future of the national agreement, for example, we've already had discussions with them regularly about even the early thinking about that and what it might mean and what processes look like, how they want to be involved, in what way would be useful for them to, how would they, what's their view of how they would like to be involved. And as we're sort of designing and setting up the process for that, that process to look at the new agreement, we're actually asking them, well, what role do you want to play? How do you want to play it? And then we will help, and that will influence how we do it. So we're trying to do it right from the start.
Yeah, I was just seeking to understand if it had changed, not...
I think it kind of I would say it's growing.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So has the Commission, even though it sits within the department, provided any advice to government on the PC recommendations, particularly as it relates to being established as a standalone independent entity? Or would that be inappropriate for the government to recommend to the department to recommend to the government?
We're in constant communication with the Commission. We actually held a workshop within the last fortnight with a range of stakeholders, and we did have representatives of the National Mental Health Commission there, and part of that discussion was, what do people think about the Productivity Commission's report? What are people's priorities for the future agreement? So they were certainly part of that conversation.
And is that likely to be sort of a feedback loop that would become public in terms of their views?
Well, I mean, it'll be up to the Commission about what it probably wants to put out publicly from its views of the Productivity Commission's review, and I guess from where government's deliberations go to for a new agreement. That'd be, I think, something that would have to be more for the Commission to answer than it would be us.
So, Mr Comley, if the Commission wanted to put out a view in relation to the Productivity Commission, can they do that independent of you?
Yes, and maybe Mr McGrath might comment. The whole idea is we're housing them within the department, but the ethos is they're independent. And I'll leave Mr McGrath to...
So what's your view, Mr McGrath?
Thank you, Senator. David McGrath, Chief Executive Officer of the National Mental Health Commission. We obviously provided a submission to the PC review which outlined our particular position on the areas of investigation that the PC was looking at. Much of what's contained in the PC report is consistent with the submission that we made, and therefore we're obviously happy and supportive of those particular elements that are in the PC report. We've also provided verbal advice via the workshop that the Deputy Secretary referred to with regards to the extension of the agreement, and we've also looked at how we can participate in appropriate ways in whatever actions taken forward from here.
Yeah, great. So the Commission, the PC, as opposed to you, identified that there were 500,000 Australians with moderate to severe mental health conditions who were ineligible for the NDIS but lack access to psychosocial supports. Is that a figure that resonates with you and your experience and research?
I'd have to say that data the PC drew from previous work that's been done by the Productivity Commission in their earlier mental health work. It's a figure that's been in the public domain for some time.
So you're comfortable that's...
It's a figure that's been in the public domain for some time.
So, Senator, just to clarify, that number is derived from the unmet needs survey that was produced, which is, I think, one of the outputs of the national agreement was to undertake that survey. And so that was a piece of work. It wasn't necessarily a survey. It's an estimation derived through a process, but that is where that figure has come from, is from the unmet needs survey. It was released about a year or so ago, and that 500,000, I think, is about 230,000 of the severe mental health need, and then about another 250,000 that are from moderate. So it's a combination of moderate to severe.
So, Minister, there's I suppose there's a lot of concern or lack of certainty in relation to where these people sit within the system with the changes to NDIS and foundational supports and the various supports that were announced in relation to the support for mild to severe, or particularly moderate to severe mental health during the election campaign. I'm interested to understand where the government sees this 500,000 people fitting in terms of providing them with support, because, I mean, we're not talking about people with a mild condition, we're actually talking with some quite severely impacted people. So is there a place these people fit within the ecosystem of care provision?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you a specific answer on what the response will be to the Commission report, other than to say, obviously, we've received that report, I think it was on the 12th of November. We're obviously considering it. It was, as I understand it, a report on the previous agreement, which was negotiated by Minister Hunt. It was the first agreement, so obviously not perfect, always able to be improved. And we will be negotiating a new agreement, and I think you'll see some of the recommendations reflected in the negotiations of the new agreement. And that will address some of those issues. If there's specific advice from officials about a particular program or how we're approaching that particular issue, I'm sure they can provide that advice. But just on how we're dealing with those recommendations from the Productivity Commission, that's how we'll be going forward.
So,
I'm just waiting on you to share.
Yeah, sure, quite understand.
This is your last question.
So, just in terms of specific funding, has there been any specific funding allocated to psychosocial supports outside of the NDIS for people with mental health conditions?
Senator, yes, the Commonwealth has a Commonwealth Psychosocial Supports Program, which it has maintained. At the most recent Health and Mental Health Ministers meeting, all health ministers around the country made a commitment to maintain their funding in the psychosocial, because they appreciated the importance of the unmet need. And so that has been described by health ministers as a priority for the future agreement. So all health ministers have agreed to do that. So we anticipate it will be prioritised in a future agreement.
So you said there was specific funding.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a program.
The Commonwealth Psychosocial Program provides about $272 million over 2 years for the continuation of that program.
Okay, so that's this year and next year?
Yeah, but I think it goes into 26, 27.
Okay, so I'm understanding then that you'll be working with the states and territories through this whole foundational supports and negotiations around the NDIS to try and establish where these people fit into the future.
I think that is something that I think Ms Devlin said was considered, that health ministers flagged they'll consider as part of the negotiation of the next agreement.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for appearing today. Chair, in the next few hours, 2 hours, I'd like to get through a number of questions, as many as possible. National Blood Authority for tainted blood or contaminated blood, pelvic mesh, Lyme disease, interim CDC, Therapeutic Goods Administration, Chief Medical Officer, and National Health and Medical Research Council.
Just to let you know, thank you for alerting me as the Chair, Senator Roberts. We're running in 10-minute blocks, so short sprints. So
Yep.
I expect you to be here for the round robin that we're going to run very shortly with your fellow senators here.
Okay.
Nice short sprints, hey?
National Blood Authority.
Right.
Tainted blood. These questions are from constituents. In the UK from 1985, factor concentrates began to be heat treated at 80 degrees for 72 hours. That's in Britain. Australia, though, chose to go with an alternative heat treatment method of 60 degrees for 72 hours, which at the time was considered to be a method to inactivate HIV, although it was noted that it was not likely that the 60-degree method of heat treatment would inactivate non-A, non-B hepatitis, which came to be known as Hep C. Why did the Australian Government and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories take the unacceptable risk of allowing its haemophilia patients to receive a product that would likely infect them with non-A, non-B hepatitis, Hep C?
Adriana Platona, Chief Executive, National Blood Authority. Thank you, Senator, for your question. Australia has one of the safest blood systems in the world, and the testing for hepatitis C and for HIV were introduced in Australia much sooner than they were in the UK. So the situation between Australia and the UK was not comparable. In 2004, there was an extensive inquiry into hepatitis C and blood supply in Australia. Many of the questions that you have raised have been discussed extensively around April 2004. People have provided submissions, testimonials. There has been an extensive inquiry at the time. Many of these issues have been discussed extensively at the time.
Thank you, Professor. We'll get to those points in a minute. Why did the Australian Government and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, by the way, you didn't answer my question as to why the Australian Government and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories took the unacceptable risk of allowing its haemophilia patients to receive a product that would likely infect them. So I'll move on to the second question. Why did the Australian Government and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, and these questions, by the way, from people who've had their lives damaged seriously, why did the Australian Government and the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories continue to allow patients to receive hepatitis-infected factor concentrates all the way up until 1990 for factor 8 and unbelievably 1993 for factor 9, when the UK were receiving the safer 80-degree treated product for both factor 8 and 9 concentrates since 1985? So we were 5 years behind, 8 years behind.
Senator, that is not my understanding of the facts, and I would be very happy to check those facts for you and provide that on notice with reference to the material submitted in 2004.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. I've got 5 questions on notice in the interest of speed. Minister, these questions relate to events that occurred long ago. I acknowledge that. Yet they still impact and kill victims today. There are people with their lives damaged seriously. That's precisely why we need a royal commission into what occurred. The government cannot produce the answers that the victims deserve. These people are deeply upset, and deservedly so. Not deservedly so, but rightly so. We need a thorough investigation where people are compelled to give evidence and answer questions under oath, unlike the 2004 Senate inquiry, which has been described as a toothless inquiry by prominent lawyer Des Collins, who was heavily involved in the UK infected blood inquiry. We don't accept the 2004 Senate inquiry. Minister, don't you think the victims of this scandal deserve answers as to what occurred and why they were infected?
Well, Senator, I don't think that's an appropriate question that I can answer for you, other than to say, you know, the constituents' issues that you raise continually in this committee, you know, are valid, and the officials have provided you, I think, very reasonable and factual advice. I don't have any other information that I can give you other than what the officials have given you, and you know, you're very entitled to come here and advocate for your constituents and their concerns, but I don't have any other advice I can give you.
Thank you. Let's move on to pelvic mesh. Following a Senate inquiry, a formal government apology, overwhelming evidence of harm and international bans in multiple countries, transvaginal mesh continues to be implanted in Australian women daily. Can you explain why these devices have not yet been banned and what specific evidence would be required for the Health Department to recommend an immediate halt to their use?
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Marcel Nojob, Medical Device and Product Quality Division. Thank you for this question and thank you for advocating for many of the patients who have had urogynecological mesh as well as had negative outcomes as a result of it. The TGA was similarly concerned with the impacts of urogynecological mesh, and that is why we have taken a number of actions in relation to this. When we look at post-market activities in relation to mesh, and in fact in all products, we undertake a risk analysis, we look at the evidence, and we go to the companies and we ask them for information in relation to those products. When it came to these products, we did look at the products, and we found that for many, the evidence was not there to support their ongoing inclusion. So for many of those products, they were actually removed from the Australian Register for Therapeutic Goods. However, for some of the products, we did find that for some health conditions, there was safety and there was still benefit for patients. And so for those products, we've continued to include them in the register. However, in support of patients, we have done other activities. We've undertaken a number of reforms. Some of those include increasing information for patients. That means more information about the product, more information about what may occur, and working closely with the health professionals to make sure that information does get to consumers. We've also recently implemented new mandatory reporting regulations. For mesh, what we found was the TGA did not have sufficient signals to be able to act on doing something. So under these new regulations, it will be mandatory for healthcare facilities to report all adverse events to us. We will then be able to pick up signals sooner and act faster. We do continue to monitor this, and this includes undergoing ongoing signal detection activities. These are really critical devices for some Australians, and so we really have to be balanced in what we remove from the register versus what we allow to continue, as well as how patients access it.
Okay,
so if I might add briefly, Senator, as Dr. Nojo has said, the role of the regulator is to understand the balance between the risk to patients and the benefits to patients. And as we've heard, there are certain instances with certain products and certain conditions where there continues to be strong benefit. But one of the roles that we do take as a regulator is to regularly update product information so that the information that's necessary for patients to make informed decisions is available to them for conversation with their registered health practitioner.
Thank you. Dr. Nojo, perhaps you can correct me on this, but this is my understanding. Now, I take note of what you said. On the back of the 2018 inquiry, a pelvic mesh registry, the Australian Pelvic Floor Procedure Registry, was established. Unfortunately, this registry fails to track long-term health outcomes of mesh-affected women, as it only tracks certain women from certain hospitals and for only a period of 24 months. Now, that may have changed. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Will the government amend the failings of the Australian Pelvic Floor Procedure Registry and instead establish a comprehensive long-term health monitoring program?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Responsibility for the pelvic floor mesh registry doesn't actually sit with the TGA. That sits with my colleagues in another part of the department. I'm not sure if our colleagues from HERD are here. I don't believe they are, Senator, but we can take that on notice and talk to our colleagues to provide you with an answer.
Thank you. The mesh clinics established after the 2018 inquiry are fundamentally failing women by providing only partial medical intervention. These clinics apparently will remove mesh devices, but categorically refuse to repair the resulting extensive damage, leaving women in a state of severe medical compromise. Can you explain why these clinics are permitted to create additional harm?
Thank you, Senator. We're not familiar with the practices of those clinics. The regulation of clinics and the regulation of health practitioners is not a responsibility of the TGA. And again, as I mentioned previously, these are largely conversations between patients and their treating health practitioners. We're not responsible for the management or the operation of those clinics.
Can you give any advice to women who are still in a lot of pain? Not medical advice, but where to go?
Senator, if I may, the TGA has established a range of information on our website. We have what's called the Mesh Hub, and I'm happy to provide that link to anyone in the committee if that's helpful. The Mesh Hub includes a range of information for people who have suffered from mesh injury. It includes information about accessing various aspects of our Medicare system, as well as treatment options and information about other services that are available to them.
The Mesh Hub.
That's correct, Senator.
Senator Roberts, I'm just flagging that I will need to shift the call shortly, so if you've got one more question.
I'll keep sprinting.
You're in the sprint, yeah.
Everyday Australian women are facing an impossible choice due to pelvic mesh complications, and I'm sure you're aware of that. For example, draining their retirement savings or suffering ongoing medical trauma. Many women are forced to access their superannuation on compassionate grounds to fund critical mesh removal or repair surgeries, while others completely forego necessary care due to prohibitive costs. What steps will the government take to establish a comprehensive support system for women that covers the full cost of surgeries, and ongoing care that they need from being harmed by a government-approved medical device? Perhaps the Minister might want to comment as well as you, Ms Noja.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I will allow the Minister to comment, but I will just note that our website does include information for patients in respect to what services they can seek support with. There are a number of MBS and PBS items available to them, which they can seek access to, and there are a number of available resources there for them.
Yeah, what I'll do for completeness, Senator, is I'll take your question on notice so I can provide you some information about what supports are available. I don't disagree with you that these women have gone through an awful ordeal, and I'm confident that we'll be able to give you some fulsome information about what's available, but you should continue to raise these issues. Okay,
last question in this sprint. The UK, Scotland and New Zealand have banned or severely restricted transvaginal mesh use due to unacceptable harm rates. Australian women continue to receive these implants daily. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. What makes Australian women different from British or New Zealand women that justifies continuing a practice that other countries apparently have deemed too dangerous?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I will note that the TGA doesn't tend to ban devices. Our approach is around inclusion versus exclusion of products, and so there remain a number of pathways available to clinicians should they deem that it is appropriate for a member of the public to have access to a product. The reason we don't ban products is because it is important that patients get the best appropriate care for their individual circumstance. I really respect your comments around what we are doing to protect women, and as I mentioned, we have actually undertaken a number of actions specifically related to these products. As part of our post-market review and our action, we did up-classify some products, others were removed, but it is important that these products do remain available because they are used for other surgical procedures apart from urogynecological conditions, and so it is important that we make sure that access is available, and we just have the rigours around where access occurs to ensure that the products are fit for purpose in how they're being used. And part of that really is the patient information and making sure that patients are appropriately provided with all the information they need to be able to support them in making sure that it is the right decision for them.
So I hear what you say and I acknowledge it, but why is it banned in other countries and not banned here?
I don't believe it is banned in other countries, and Australia has taken the step to up-classify these products. In other countries, they've not gone as far, I guess, as Australia has in terms of its regulatory approach. Some countries are continuing to look at these products and make decisions about what they do, but they will be making those decisions based on the evidence they have in front of them and the signals and the risks that they've seen in the patients that are presenting in their jurisdiction.
Okay, so you're going to send me more.
Sorry, I'd reflect, if I may, Senator, that in your question you did say that in other countries that these products had been banned or significantly restricted. As Dr Noja has indicated in her answer, we have also undertaken some actions that have restricted those devices as well through the upscheduling and also through the removal of some from the register and also the imposition of conditions of inclusion. So we have taken regulatory actions as well.
So you're going to send me more information, and the minister's going to give me her answer and question notice, and I'm going to stay on the treadmill.
And you've got an extra 5 minutes out of me, Senator Roberts. You've done pretty well tonight on the sprint, I have to say.
Keep me down for the staying on the treadmill.
There you go. I'll wait to see that day. Senator Askew, you have the call.
Thank you.
I've just got some questions in follow-up to the tick-borne disease inquiry that we undertook last year, the year before. Lost track of time. Who would I be speaking to? Do you want me to ask it? I was just at someone coming. No one's. Oh, here we come. We right? Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for the provision of the response to our questions on notice from the last lot which we've received today. But I've just got a few follow-up questions in regard to the inquiry. It's actually the second Senate inquiry that's been held since 2016 on the same issue, but it seemed to, the response from the government to the actual report basically is reiterating a lot of the same things that were said back then. So I just wonder if the department can give me an update on where the major improvements have happened since the 2016 report was, because when you're looking back, there's not a lot of measurable areas that we can see that there's been improvement.
Thank you, Senator. Genevieve Quilty, First Assistant Secretary, Health Protection Policy and Surveillance Division. Our response to the second inquiry did cover a number of activities that we did undertake following the 2016 inquiry. And in fact, some of those recommendations from the Senate inquiry asked us to review some of that work that we had undertaken as a result of the 2016 inquiry. And a government response was tabled on the 6th of November to that second inquiry, and we're currently developing a program of work based on that government response.
So will one of those be to create a task force or a group of people that actually are living with the tick-borne diseases or Lyme disease?
So, Senator, thank you for your question. I'm not aware that that was one of the recommendations that was in the second report, but I'm happy to be corrected. But we do work with patient groups when we're developing our evidence base going forward in relation to responding to tick bites in Australia.
Okay. I noticed in the response that you've given me today on the questions on notice, you've talked about 2 lots of research. Can you confirm when they were actually funded and when they concluded?
We did fund a program of research, Senator, so yes we did, but I'll need to take on notice those 2 particular studies and come back to you about whether or not they've been completed.
I think they're probably ones that were done sort of after the 2016 inquiry rather than more recently, so there's no further research that's been undertaken since those ones were actually funded?
Not funded by the Commonwealth, no.
Okay, that's interesting. So a lot of the evidence that we heard during the campaign, during the inquiry, related to overseas diagnosis, especially if it's overseas acquired tick-borne diseases or Lyme disease. And part of the recommendations in the inquiry were very much about looking at that. Has any work been done to investigate the diagnosis options from overseas?
Thank you, Senator. Rajan Martin, Assistant Secretary, Communicable Diseases Policy Branch. So one of the recommendations does go to that issue. I'll just try and track it down. But I think one of the challenges is the extent to which some of the overseas testing aligns with the quality assurance standards that we have here in Australia.
Will some work be undertaken, though, to actually analyse that?
So I think the government response, Senator, does acknowledge the work that we do with the Public Health Laboratory Network, so that is something that we will look into.
Okay, because a lot of the evidence that we heard was that there was false false positive test results happening and things like that. So in Australia, so it would be very interesting to see what the comparison is globally around other types of diagnosis options that are out there. Another one of the recommendations was regarding the DISCAT naming and the fact that that is, you know, it's got a stigma, it doesn't provide clarity to the GPs, and the patients, you know, feel like they're being branded and it's actually not a true reflection of what they're actually experiencing. So has any work been undertaken yet on that point?
So in the government response that was tabled on the 6th of November, we did indicate that we'd work and look at explore the implementation of this recommendation with both medical practitioners and, of course, as you mentioned, the patient stakeholder groups accordingly.
Okay. So the patient groups that you're working with, I know that there is quite a few different people out there who will have had it, but is Dr. Richard Slofel part of that, any of those groups?
So we haven't commenced implementing the recommendations yet, Senator.
Okay, so his evidence was pretty important during the campaign. I keep saying that, I'm so tired. The inquiry, and therefore I think he would be very valuable to have it as part of any sort of consultation that you do. Just see what else I had on my list. With the research I mean, obviously, if there's only been those two that have ever been done in the last 10 years or so, does the department undertake any individual sort of self-initiated research that may look into the prevalence or frequency or geographical locations of where tick bites are in Australia?
No, Senator. The interim CDC doesn't conduct its own research in this area.
Okay.
So Senator, the departments work closely with the CSIRO in undertaking that research, and one of the recently published papers was titled Exploring Borrelia in Australia, Isolation, Genomic Characterisation and Host and Vector Associations. And so what a lot of that research has sought to investigate is whether or not there are the bacteria present in Australia that causes Lyme disease. And what that research found is that despite the significant work that CSIRO has undertaken, that bacteria has not been found to be present on Australian ticks. So
does the department believe that Lyme disease exists in Australia?
So the department certainly recognises Lyme disease, and there's a range of diagnoses and supports available where a person has visited an area that's endemic with Lyme disease. So certainly
within Australia or overseas?
But so far, as I've mentioned, Senator, there hasn't been any discovery of the bacteria present in Australia that is known to cause Lyme disease, nor any other Australian ticks that are understood to have caused Lyme disease.
So all the people who are out there with tick-borne diseases that are suffering and feeling like they're being deserted, what's your message to them? Where do we go with that? That there's no Lyme disease in the country?
So there's a range of other tick-borne illnesses which government and department certainly recognise and have in place appropriate diagnosis and treatment for. The DSCAT clinical pathway, I guess, tried to get at that very tricky issue where there are significant debilitating symptoms that are attributed to ticks, but where it's not clear what the exact causal mechanism is. So that seeks to work very collaboratively with patients to understand their symptoms, look at potential other conditions that might be causing some of those symptoms as well.
Just on the research from CSIRO, I noticed, I did acknowledge that I actually underlined it in your response. When was that conducted?
I'd have to take on notice, Senator, when that commenced, but I think the finalisation of that occurred late last calendar year or into early this year.
So it's only early this year. Okay, that's very good. My other question then is in regard to the gathering of patient groups. When will that happen, when you actually start to form that consultation group? You said that you haven't actually formed it at this point.
So that's something that we're looking to undertake, I'd hope early in the new year, consistent with the establishment of the Australian Centre for Disease Control. So that will form one of the elements of the Centre's work program.
Yep.
one final question. You've just prompted me on that with the Centre of Disease Control. The US CFDC has just recently confirmed validation of chronic Lyme disease. Is that something that the type of thing that you will be collaborating with overseas CDCs on? Will that sort of sharing of information occur?
I think that's probably a broader question. But yeah, I'd certainly see there'd be benefit in working with international partners on the issue.
Okay. I'll leave it there, but we'll keep on watching. And every estimates, we seem to come back to the same questions. But thank you.
Thank you, Senator Askew. Senator Antic.
Thank you. These are questions for the TGA. Thank you. Professor Lawler, thank you for attending today. I want to draw your attention to the 19th of November this year, the United States CDC updated its autism and vaccines page, and they updated that to state, and I quote, "The claim vaccines do not cause autism is not an evidence-based claim because studies have not ruled out the possibility that infant vaccines cause autism. Studies supporting a link have been ignored by health authorities. Scientific studies have not ruled out the possibility that infant vaccines contribute to the development of autism. However, this statement has historically been disseminated by the CDC and other federal health agencies within HHS to prevent vaccine hesitancy." And 2 days later, your TGA put up a statement on their own website saying the evidence shows that vaccines used in Australia are safe, effective and not associated with autism. Who's wrong? Is the CDC wrong?
Professor Anthony Lawler, Deputy Secretary of Health Products Regulation. Thanks for that question, Senator, and the opportunity to speak to this issue. Look, policy decisions of the US CDC and the US FDA really matters for the US administration. The questions of that nature should be directed to them. But I do have a number of observations on this matter. As you highlighted, in my role as the head of the TGA and with the Commonwealth Chief Medical Officer who's sitting next to me, we did make that statement because I think there are some fundamental challenges with the statement. It has not yet been proven that there is no link between vaccines and autism. It's a basic tenet of science that if a claim is made, the onus is on the claimant to provide evidence to support that claim. So this is one of the ways in which we distinguish between claims that are scientific and claims that are pseudoscientific. So there's a whole lot of theory involved in that, things like the verifiability of claims and Popperian falsificationism, but in essence, a theory is considered scientifically valid if it can be tested and potentially proven false through observational experiments. I know we've had conversations before around how to represent it. So an example would be that the only way to verify a claim such as all birds are white will be you actually look at every bird, which is not possible, but on the other hand, if you see a single black bird, that's enough to disprove or reject that claim. So while an identified link would prove that there is a causative relationship between vaccines and autism, you can't just use evidence to prove something doesn't exist. You can only show that there is an overwhelming volume of evidence against it. So this is why the responsibility has always been on individuals or groups claiming linkages between vaccines and autism to prove those linkages, and to be absolutely clear, that linkage has not been proven. In fact, when Andrew Wakefield first claimed in 1997 in the now comprehensively discredited Lancet article, which has been retracted and thoroughly debunked, that there was a link between MMR and autism, even he understood that the burden was his to prove this. Again, the burden that has not been met. Consequently, it makes no sense in terms of basic science to suggest that there being no proof that something exists is somehow supportive of the argument that it does exist. Because by this argument, we could just as easily say that we claim that chicken nuggets cause autism because there's no evidence that they don't. Or we could say that we can't say that vaccination doesn't make you excellent at something because nobody's proven it doesn't. This doesn't make sense from a scientific point of view. These might seem like flippant examples, but they're intended to show that proving the absence of an association is not consistent with the scientific approach. What we do at the TGA and what the CMO and I reflected in our statement is that we accept and review all of the evidence and determine whether that evidence supports or refutes the claims made. And it's important to note as well that there have been multiple studies over decades involving millions of vaccine recipients, all of which have shown no demonstrable causative link between autism and vaccines, vaccine ingredients, vaccine schedules or vaccinations. Key examples include a comprehensive 2014 meta-analysis of more than 1.2 million children that found
Thank you, Professor. I think you're ready. Would you like to table the document you're reading
I'm happy to table it. I mean, one of the challenges we have, Senator, is that there is a lot of focus on small studies, and large studies with millions of subjects that show no evidence are frequently just pushed to the side.
So you're
and
able
not
to point to any studies which categorically show that there is no link between the childhood vaccination schedule and autism, that categorically show that point. That should be achievable.
So key examples include a comprehensive 2014 meta-analysis of more than 1.2 million children that found no link between vaccines, including MMR, thimerosal or mercury, and autism. So odds ratio, which is how much more likely you are to have something if you have the intervention not,
can you
hovered around 1.9. Sorry?
Can you provide, even on notice, can you provide a citation for that study?
So I'll answer the question. Yes, I can provide multiple studies over decades with millions of participants that demonstrate no causative link between
Are there any studies you can draw attention to which study the entire schedule? I mean, before a child is 1 year old, they're, I think, subjected to 29 or so, whatever the number is. Could it possibly be that there's a combination of antigens, the antigenic load, which is something which should be studied? Has that been studied? Are you aware of any studies which show that there is no causative link to autism in that circumstance?
So there was a 2019 Danish study of 657,000 children that found no increased autism risk after MMR vaccination, and there's also a 2013 analysis of US data on cumulative antigen exposure over vaccine schedules, which showed no association with autism.
So there are also a number of studies which show a link as well. You're suggesting here that the CDC are wrong, and are you able to categorically rule out childhood vaccination, either individual vaccines or the entire schedule, as a causative factor in autism?
So I'm struggling somewhat to explain in a different way, Senator. I'm not saying that the CDC and the FDA are wrong. Questions around their position are questions to be placed to the US administration. What I'm trying to explain is that the way science works is that if there is a theory, you collect information and you either support that theory or you reject that theory. There have been multiple studies over decades involving millions of vaccine recipients, all of which have shown no demonstrable causative link between autism and vaccines. The studies that you're specifically referencing, it may be better perhaps for those to be tabled because there are a number that have significant methodological flaws. And you know,
that's the criticism of those which say the opposite as well. So
no, the criticism is not on the outcome of the study, Senator. The criticism
it is they are highly criticised.
Well, the criticism is not. Sorry, Chair.
Point of order. I would just ask that in asking a question that the Senator allows the official at the table to respond to the question without interruption.
Absolutely. If we can let the official respond to the question that's
go ahead.
asked.
We don't need a 12-minute answer. We've got short time.
I don't think it's contingent.
Well, if I need your advice, I'll take it, but I'm not asking for it right at the moment.
Actually, let's just. It is late, and
through the chair, we'll do it in the common manner. If we're all directing traffic, please continue, Professor Lawler.
Well, you're not the chair. So.
You're not the chair either. So.
I know that. I know that.
Senators, I will provide the direction.
Seems like we've hit a little point of,
Senator Antic,
of sensitivity here.
I'm just dealing with, obviously we are trying to deal with your question and knowing that you are very passionate about this issue. I would like to hear Professor Lawler's answer as well. So if we can just hold the interjections, we can get the answers and listen in silence if possible. Thank you. Professor Lawler.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I don't know that I have a great deal more to add to the response. I've endeavoured to explain the way in which evidence is incorporated into decision making. I've highlighted the fact that there have been multiple studies of a significant level of rigour with a high population studied over many years, including meta-analyses, which is where randomised controlled trials are examined across multiple trials to understand the clear trends and findings. I would also just point out that when we assess these articles and the articles that come in making claims, we do not assess them on the basis of the outcome. We assess them on the basis of their scientific rigour.
I'll ask you again, can you categorically rule out childhood vaccination, the immunisation schedule, either individually or in their total combined form as a causative factor in autism?
So, Senator, on the basis of my previous endeavour to explain how evidence is incorporated, there are multiple studies looking at millions of children over many years that indicate no link between vaccines and autism.
So you're ruling it out?
I've answered your question, Senator.
It doesn't sound like you've ruled it out. One way to do it, would it not be to have a study comparing children that have had the schedule and those who have not? That was done in the United States with the Henry Ford study. It's been done on would that not be a simple way for the TGA to settle this? Because that obviously would show no causative link. I should point out that there are now, as was reported last week in the media, 1 in 27 Australian children are diagnosed with autism in 2025, and that is something in the order of 1 in 10,000 back in 1986. At the same time, the childhood immunisation schedule has increased dramatically. There would seem to be a question to be asked there, would there not?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. And I do note that this is a very important issue for a number of reasons. We're seeing significant efforts around the world to undermine community faith in. Sorry.
Senator Anstey, can we let Professor Lawler answer the question? I think he was mid-sentence still.
So there are a number of factors that cause concern with. I mean, you've cited the Henry Ford Health response, and as an example of research that could potentially be undertaken in Australia. We have responded to questions around the Henry Ford Health study in Senate Question on Notice 25/001581. And again, this is a really good example for our previous conversation of the fact that we do not make judgments on studies based on their outcome. We make judgment on studies based on their scientific rigour. The paper itself had several methodological issues, including the sample size of unvaccinated children. The characteristic of two groups was statistically different. We've had a conversation previously around placebo-controlled trials. A higher order of rigour in the hierarchy of studies is the randomised controlled trial, and we saw statistic differences between the two populations in this study. The length of time unvaccinated children were followed up was much shorter than for vaccinated children. Comparisons were made between children who received no vaccinations and children who received a range of either one vaccination or multiple vaccinations, so it wasn't controlled. So I think it's important to note that that we rely on robust studies that are conducted around the world. We analyse the rigour of those studies. There is a very clear rejection and repudiation of that study by the Henry Ford Health Centre itself for a number of reasons. And so one of the things that I think is important to note that we look for and accept safety signals from around the world. We look for and review and incorporate appropriately research that's done around the world. And as I've indicated, the overwhelming body of evidence indicates that there is no linkage between vaccines and autism.
So can you, just as my final question on this topic, can you please direct me to any studies you're aware of which show that there is no link between childhood vaccination and autism, and you can do that on notice if you like.
Happy to do it on notice. I have 14 here I can read to you, but I'll do it on notice.
Like about 20 that I can show you that say the opposite.
I imagine you do.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, I'll come back to some other topics.
Yes,
yep.
we'll return to you for another block.
Thank you.
Senator Roberts, you ready for another sprint?
Yes.
Okay, you have the call.
Following the 2018 formal apology, there has been minimal progress for mesh-affected women. What specific framework will the government develop to establish a national redress system that provides comprehensive support, including medical care, financial compensation, and ongoing treatment for women harmed by pelvic mesh implants?
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Marcel Noja, Medical Device and Product Quality Division. The TGA does monitor mesh, however, we don't tend to establish redress schemes. Redress streams are a matter for government, so the question of a redress scheme is really up to government.
So, Minister, the TGA has made clear, rightly so, that it's not responsible for managing this. Could you tell me what specific framework the government will develop to establish a national redress system that provides comprehensive support, including medical care, financial compensation and ongoing treatment for women harmed by pelvic mesh?
I'll take it on notice for you, Senator.
What financial relationships, perhaps the TGA could help here, what financial relationships exist between medical device manufacturers and the clinicians, researchers or government advisors involved in pelvic mesh policy decisions and registry design?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. In relation to relationships between medical device sponsors and clinicians, the TGA is not aware of those relationships. That would be a matter for those individuals to manage.
So you're not aware of that?
No. The TGA doesn't track those relationships, Senator.
What safeguards are in place to prevent industry influence from compromising patient safety and regulatory decisions?
I can talk to the regulatory decisions more broadly. The TGA does undertake its decisions independently. When we do undertake a post-market activity, we look at the product itself and we go to the companies and specifically ask them for information about that product. We have a significant conflict of interest process in place with our staff to ensure that there is no potential compromise. That includes any staff that have come from industry not being able to work on products for that particular industry. We do look at the evidence and then we will send questions back to the relevant sponsors. We publish significant information about the decisions on our website as well, and you will see there are a number of regulatory decisions that we make in the post-market space that sometimes are removal of products, sometimes they're conditions that are provided for products. So conditions might be things such as, you can only continue to supply this if you provide us additional data annually for the ongoing period for which, the condition applies.
There are a lot of people now suspicious. I've been suspicious for decades, but a lot of people since COVID and the shenanigans around that are very suspicious of the connections between pharmaceutical manufacturers, implement manufacturers and the medical professions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do any work at all in researching that or investigating that?
So I think it's important to note, Senator, it is that as a member of the medical profession and went through at a time when there was a significant amount of focus on interactions between drug companies and medical practitioners. I can speak to that as well. There is a strong focus among the health professional regulators, and the health practitioner regulatory agency is not here, but I do know that the codes of conduct that cover medical professionals speak specifically to undue influence, and so there is a very strong professional focus on ensuring that the decisions are made on the basis of patient welfare and not on the interests of pharmaceutical device manufacturers. I don't know whether Professor Kidd would like to add comment to that in terms of medical professional approach.
I'll just reinforce what you're saying, Professor Wall.
Would you like to make any comment? This is a bit of a sidetrack on the TGA's revenue sources being 96% from pharmaceutical companies and the industry, and in particular, your predecessor, Professor John Skerritt, left 8 months after resigning, mm-hmm. and went to the Board of Medicines Australia, which is a pharmaceutical lobby industry. 8 months.
Yeah, so Senator,
many people weren't. What's sad is that many people were not shocked that he did it.
So I'm not in a position to comment on the decisions and the actions of Professor Skerritt once he's left the department. There's obviously a code of conduct that covers the decisions and actions of individuals after they leave. I would comment that I'm not sure whether you and I have had this conversation previously, but it is not true that we receive 96% of our funding from industry. We have 3 specific sources of revenue within the TGA. TGA, we have approximately 72% of our funding comes from fees and charges. Now, that is not a donation from industry. That is not money paid to us from industry for any return or largesse. That is actually evaluation fees, and that covers such things as the evaluation of medicines, devices. It covers inspections and the like. Approximately 27% of our revenue also comes from what we call our public good funding or our appropriation. So that's the money that is assigned to us in the budget and is intended to cover off on activities that are not appropriate for cost recovery from industry. They include things like chemical and medicine scheduling. So, for instance, the decisions that we've taken around B6, vitamin B6 recently is covered by our public good funding. The compliance work that we do, the special access work that we do and others. And we also receive an amount from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to undertake regulatory capability development exercises in the region through our regional strengthening program, but also to undertake the Pacific Medicines Testing Program, which is intended to provide surety to our Pacific neighbours and Timor-Leste around protecting against counterfeit and falsified medical products. So those who, and I understand entirely why you use that figure is thrown around quite a bit. Those who are looking at that 96% are some years out of date in terms of our funding. The additional money that we have for public good also goes to our vaping reforms and the enforcement and compliance work that we do there.
Okay, we still didn't hear about safeguards that are in place to prevent industry influence from compromising regulatory decisions, but we'll move on.
If I may, Senator, I mean, and Dr. Noja did speak to that, but I would highlight as well that there is a significant interactions that we have as well with our global counterparts, and we also, like any other part of the department, contribute to our performance measures and also our annual reporting. So the process that we have in place for accountability, I mean, appearance at this committee is one of those, but also the way in which we respond to questions from Parliament, the way in which we are accountable to our Minister, and the way in which we're accountable to the public through our stakeholder engagement are all checks and balances on those activities.
And yet actions speak more loudly than words, and Professor John Skerritt, moving on to the Board of Medicines Australia, says a hell of a lot that can't be ignored. If your wife, Mr. Lawler, your daughter, your sister, experienced chronic pain, sexual dysfunction and permanent disability from a government-approved medical device, then had to drain her superannuation to pay $20,000 or more for corrective surgery, would you consider the current system adequate?
One of
yeah, I think it is.
Thanks. I just have a point of order, Chair. Yes. I'm not sure that it's in order to ask a public servant to A, give an opinion and B, be referring to their personal family members. So I would suggest that question's out of order.
Yeah.
I can give you the answer that I would think, but let's ask the Minister. If someone you're close to, female, sexual dysfunction, permanent disability from government-approved medical device, this has happened to a lot of women, and then had to drain a superannuation fund to pay $20,000 plus for corrective surgery, would you consider the current system adequate? There's nothing personal in that. I've got a wife
it is
too,
personal
I've got a
because you've
daughter.
asked me to reflect on whether that might have happened to someone close to me.
Any woman,
No,
any
we
woman
just,
at all.
it's an issue with the language, but I
Okay,
understand why you are
I'll withdraw
pressing these
that
questions.
and just say, what do you think about women
I understand.
facing this?
I understand what you're asking.
Would you consider the current system adequate?
I've taken on notice to come back to you about what current supports are available. I understand there is an ongoing conversation about how women in this situation can be supported, and I will come back to you on what the government is doing. And if I've got any more information about what the government's considering in the future, I can give that to you as well.
Thank you. I'm going to try and finish early here because I've just got one small question. Very simple question.
So I don't know how you're going to do that.
I read it. I've got 9. Why were men not included in the 2018 inquiry, given that many men who have had the mesh inserted for hernias and other reasons are suffering the same massive internal symptoms that women suffer?
Which inquiry?
Sorry?
2018, which...
Yes, the inquiry. There's an inquiry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The terms of reference for the inquiry weren't set by the TGA, so we would need to be able to consider what the committee at the time decided the terms should be. Those decisions were made outside of us.
My point, I guess, is, Ms. Noja, thanks for your answer, that we just don't know the extent of the problem, male and female.
If I may, Senator, I think it's really important. The TGA is actively continuing to work closely with consumers. We very much acknowledge that this is a significant health concern and that there are ongoing health issues associated with these products. We regularly hear from women and men who've been affected by these products, and one of the things we've done to really focus on that consumer voice and what we can do better moving forward is work by establishing a medical device consumer working group. There's over 21 representatives of various consumer groups on that, and part of what we've done is a range of communication activities and supports on how we can support patients to better have those discussions with their healthcare provider about what is the best treatment for them. Whilst I very much acknowledge this does not help those who have had issues in the past, it is a step forward to how we can better support patients moving forward.
I also would highlight, Senator, if I may, just to reflect on Dr. Noja's earlier comments as well, is that regardless of the terms of reference of the inquiry, our encouragement to patients to report issues that they experience with medicines or medical devices or blood products or biologicals or any of the therapeutic goods that we regulate is irrespective of gender, and it's irrespective of condition or situation, that we would hope. And in fact, one of the reasons that we are kind of assured by our vigilance programs is that we do encourage a very low threshold for reporting incidents, which we then assess for causal relationships. But also in our response, and as Dr. Noja has highlighted, we have our consumer working group, which is not gender specific, but also the requirements that will be imminently implemented for the mandatory device-related health reporting of adverse events for healthcare facilities will similarly not be gendered.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Nampijinpa Price.
Thank you, Chair. My questions will relate to maternity care in the Northern Territory, the Royal Darwin Hospital's structural damage following Cyclone Fina, and Commonwealth funding.
How many more blocks he's got?
Okay. Thank you. Is everyone there? All right. Recent reporting from the Northern Territory Government and the NT Health indicates a severe deterioration in the Territory's health system. The collapse of aged care capacity, structural failures of the Royal Darwin Hospital during the tropical cyclone Fina, ongoing maternity safety concerns and persistent Commonwealth Territory funding disputes all point, I suppose, to a system approaching crisis. In October 2025, NT Health reported that 83 long-stay older patients were occupying hospital beds despite being medically ready for aged care replacement, with an average stay of 191 days. This number has doubled over 5 years, and NT hospitals have declared repeated code yellow emergencies linked to aged care bed shortages. During Cyclone Fina, bricks fell from the internal facade of the Royal Darwin Hospital and ceiling collapsed near the ICU. NT Health leadership has stated the hospital is creaking at the seams and nearing the end of its 50-year structural life. NT Health has advised that the Territory can't fund the replacement tertiary hospital required to ensure patient safety and disaster resilience. The NT Government reporting indicates that the Territory receives only 31.9% of Commonwealth cost sharing under the National Health Reform Agreement, compared with 37.5% on the national average. Anti-Health estimates that this gap, combined with territory expenditure and aeromedical retrievals, long-stay aged care patients in hospitals and remote primary care results in an annual shortfall of about $400 million. Now, maternity services in the top end continue to face extreme pressure following the closure of private maternity care. Families report labouring in waiting rooms, lack of continuity of care, and needing to travel interstate to give birth. The Territory Government has requested $35 million for maternity upgrades. The Commonwealth is reportedly considering providing $10 million. And it's been widely reported that Defence families are leaving the Northern Territory because of the lack of availability of maternity services. So that's, I suppose, what I want to start with, and my questions will relate to all those matters. In terms of the aged care bed block and hospital overload, does the Commonwealth, I suppose, accept the NT Health's reporting that more than 80 older patients were occupying NT hospital beds in October 2025 despite being medically fit for discharge?
Chair, can I just get a little bit of guidance? Because obviously we dealt with this extensively within outcome 3 today on long-stay older patients, and I can repeat a lot of things I said there, which obviously was that we don't have an agreed definition of what is a long-stay older patient. We acknowledge the issue is significant in a number of jurisdictions, but we don't endorse any particular number, and we've been working actively on a case-by-case basis with states and territories on moving long-stay older patients forward. So I'm just conscious that we had quite a long discussion of this in outcome 3. I just want your guidance whether you want us to continue that part of the conversation.
I think if there was a quite lengthy discussion during the day on this issue that circled around it, maybe if Senator Nambajima-Price, if you, in your backgrounding of these questions, I note that you did say they were quite specific to the Northern Territory, so maybe that's helpful if you could contain some of those questions to, and maybe thinking about how we frame those. There is a whole lot of information that's already collected within Hansard, so exactly what the Secretary has alluded to, and a very lengthy conversation that we had earlier today on this.
I suppose it's specific to the fact that the hospital in the Northern Territory, there's been overcrowding within the hospital. They have triggered Code Yellow declarations on a number of occasions, so it is specific to the Northern Territory. A number of those patients are also Indigenous patients, so it speaks to Indigenous health, closing the gap issues as well. And I suppose what I'd like to understand is what, if any, immediate action will the Commonwealth take to address the chronic aged care bed shortages that continue this crisis? Because obviously the hospital infrastructure is under the pump in the Northern Territory. When public services are under pressure, it puts pressure on the Northern Territory, where we have some of our most marginalised Indigenous patients that are suffering from chronic diseases. It exacerbates those problems as well. So,
can I suggest a solution? Senator Nambajima-Price, I'm not trying to take away the fact that you are a Northern Territory Senator and have the right to ask this question on behalf of your electorate and your constituents. But whether it would be helpful to maybe place this on notice for the department. I am conscious because there were many senators in here this afternoon that asked questions also containing some of the facts that you're looking for and the answers that you're looking for, and whether it's helpful for the department to answer your question with a much more fulsome answer, and maybe gathering some of that information that's already contained within Hansard.
I mean, I would be prepared to say, Chair, that We are acutely aware of the issue. We have been engaging, if not on a daily, certainly a weekly basis with the Northern Territory on what could be done here. We also are in the process of obviously negotiating the broader Commonwealth State Agreement, and obviously Northern Territory has not been backward in coming forward and putting forward the specific issues they have. You also made a comment in your opening preamble about the funding level for the Northern Territory. I don't think that funding level for health recognises that as part of the one-year rollover deal that was done with the Commonwealth, there was a specific uplift for the Northern Territory, which essentially uplifted them to the funding level of the other states. So, and then the further question of what the Northern Territory's arrangement is currently subject to that current negotiation about the five-year agreement. So, yeah, we are engaging very intensely on the long stay older patient issue with the specifics of the Northern Territory, and that is also being rolled into part of that broader negotiation with the states and territories.
Okay, thanks for that. It's still, I mean, you know, there is obviously still a shortfall of $400 million that obviously the uplift might have been provided, but it's still not meeting the needs for the Northern Territory. In terms of the structural failure and safety concerns at Royal Darwin Hospital, what's the Commonwealth's assessment of the structural safety of Royal Darwin Hospital following the cyclone ceiling collapse due to the cyclone, and what capital funding has been allocated to ensure the hospital remains safe and functional, given NT Health's advice that the facility is approaching the end of its operational life?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Caitlin O'Brien, Public Hospital Strategies Branch. We've been in touch with NT officials following the cyclone who've shared their assessment. We don't do assessment of infrastructure individually. I understand they're working with NEMA following the cyclone to really look at remediation efforts, so that should be directed to NEMA.
That should be directed to NEMA?
The National Emergency Management Agency.
They were on yesterday morning during legal constitutional affairs.
I suppose it's also the fact that there is a need for a new tertiary hospital. That is ultimately, I think, the greatest concern, because Royal Darwin Hospital, as has been pointed out, is approaching the end of its operational life. So, given the advice from NT Health that the Territory can't fund a replacement tertiary hospital, what is the Commonwealth's position on providing capital funding for a new tertiary hospital in Darwin?
So we've seen the media reports about the need for this and the calls from NT ministers around wanting Commonwealth support here, but we're yet to receive a formal proposal or request for funding from the state. When we do fund multiple infrastructure projects, including hospitals, through the Commonwealth, but when we do that, we assess a proposal that is received from the state, and that has multiple criteria. We're yet to receive that from the state.
Okay. Well, I've been told otherwise, that there has been correspondence, but I will follow that up, and I'd like to understand if there has been any other correspondence been made by the NT government, and if you can table that at all. So is the Commonwealth then, the Commonwealth's not going to look into any business case or planning work until such time as you suggest that there needs to be you're suggesting that there hasn't been any call from the Territory Government?
We haven't received a formal proposal, no.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll come back to that at a later date and perhaps get in contact, because that's contrary to what I've been told. So in terms of maternity safety, and this goes to the infrastructure collapse as well, Does the Commonwealth accept ongoing reports of unsafe maternity conditions, including mothers labouring in waiting rooms? And if so, why has the Commonwealth not agreed to the full $35 million requested by the NT Government for maternity upgrades at Royal Darwin Hospital, despite the absence of any private maternity alternative in the top end?
Celia Street, Acting Deputy Secretary of Strategy and First Nations Group. We are in, as the Secretary indicated, we are in regular contact with the Northern Territory Government in terms of proposals in relation to maternity services and the like, and those conversations are ongoing.
I mean, just add, so the Senator, in both the states and territories, it's the responsibility of those states and territories for ensuring that their health services are appropriately regulated to provide safe services. That's not a Commonwealth responsibility. I mean, Chief Medical Officer might want to comment on that across the board. To the extent that the Northern Territory asks us for a funding injection to be able to deal with the infrastructure needs, that's a separate issue. But in terms of clinical governance, that's really a matter for the Territory. Professor Kidd?
Yeah, absolutely, Secretary. These are issues for the each of the jurisdictions. I totally sympathise with the issue you're putting forward, though, Senator, having worked in the Territory throughout my career.
So why was the Commonwealth prepared to fund private maternity access in Tasmania but not the Northern Territory? I mean, we're dealing with, as I said, some of our most marginalised individuals who, when private maternity isn't available, then the public system is overloaded. And this is like putting babies, Australian children's lives at risk at the same time. Like, I don't accept that it's just a simple handball back to the Northern Territory. The Northern Territory government, you know, they don't have the funds to be able to support Territorians, especially given the previous Labor government who's wrecked the joint. But again, I suppose, yeah, the funding's been made available in Tasmania, but not the Northern Territory. This speaks to closing the gap. We heard from Senator McCarthy talking about, penalising states and territories for not meeting closing the gap targets. But how can they meet their targets in the Northern Territory when they don't have the funds to provide the services for some of our most vulnerable? What policy principle explains the difference between Tasmania and the Northern Territory receiving private maternity access?
Just before you answer that, I'm just flagging, Senator, that I will need to share the call
I only have one more question after
break.
this
so
one.
This is after Secretary.
So Ms Street may want to expand, but my understanding is that this comes a little bit back to the question of not having an infrastructure proposal formally from the Northern Territory Government for the hospital. When the issue arose in Hobart, the Commonwealth was approached reasonably quickly by the Tasmanian Government asking to lean into that issue, at which point we engaged to look at the continuity of maternity services there. We didn't receive such an approach from the Northern Territory Government at the time. They have subsequently engaged with us, and we are now engaging in discussions with the Northern Territory Government to see what role, if any, the Commonwealth would play. So it is this issue that we had to wait for an approach from the Northern Territory Government.
Well, I would argue that there has been an approach made because that is what I've been advised of.
Yeah, no, we're not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
I'm just talking about the sequencing, that there was a long gap between when the Tasmanian approach was made compared with the Northern Territory approach was made, and now we're engaging with them constructively in that discussion.
Has the Health Minister provided a figure of $10 million in response to the request for $35 million?
So there was correspondence between Minister Edlington and Minister Butler around what different options might be for the NT. The indication was given that that amount would be similar to what was provided, to your exact point, to Tasmania.
Can that correspondence, please, relating specifically to this between the Health Minister and the Northern Territory Government, please be provided to this committee?
We'll take that on notice.
Yep, thank you. I am shifting the call now to your colleague.
I've got one last question and then I'm done.
Well, you can get in a row with her because I have promised the call to her before we head to the evening break. So
it's just with regard to whether has Department of Defence advised that declining access to safe maternity services affecting their families in the Northern Territory.
So can you repeat the question?
Has Department of Defence advised that declining access to safe maternity services affecting Defence families' decisions to stay in the Northern Territory or to start a family?
I've had no direct contact from Defence in relation to that matter.
We can take on notice whether it's coming from some other part of the department.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Senator Majimba Price. Senator Little, you have the call.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask questions again about the oversight of governance in organisations that deliver services to Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. Thank you, Ms Turner. I understand that the department funds the Coonamble Aboriginal Health Service in New South Wales, and I think you would be aware that there are a number of allegations. My office has certainly become aware of those. They include allegations of failing to maintain a functional clinical governance committee, a critical incident register, a pathology follow-up system. The AMS clinic had one GP in Dubbo, had one GP for over 5,000 patients. The dental program was shut down, even though the program remained actively funded. Staff were accessing confidential patient medical records. There was an overseas trip that included family members to the tune of some 400,000 between 21 and 23. So when did you become aware of these allegations that were made against this health service? Who tells you about that, and when did you find out if you knew about them?
Hi, Senator. Melinda Turner, First Assistant Secretary, First Nations Health Division. We've become aware of these issues through various forms, so it may be through community complaining to our grants hub. It was actually brought to our attention through the media that we became aware of this issue. And so we met with Coonamble Health Service, who, as you mentioned, we do fund. So we met with them, and we after meeting with them, we made the decision to appoint a grant administrator to the organisation. So the grant administrator basically they're put in place to ensure that Commonwealth grant funding has been used in an appropriate manner and for the purpose for which it was provided. What we asked the grant administrator to do was to oversee CAR's management of grant funding provided by the department, as well as undertake a forensic audit of the 2022-23 financial year onwards.
Okay. The question was, when did you become aware of it?
Yes.
So 24th of May.
24th of May.
This year?
The article. Yes, that's right.
So how is it that you have a national Aboriginal community-controlled health organisation that is representative of its members? We keep hearing about how important Aboriginal community-controlled health services are. Yeah. You've got people in an area where health services are problematic at best, with some of the worst health outcomes in that state. How is it that the Department of Health becomes aware of that litany of allegations of issues through the media, when I've asked previously, and I'm going to go to that, about your process for assessing grant suitability?
Yes, Senator. So the Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisations, so the ARCHOs, are managed by their own board. So it's not, ARCHO does not manage their board, so they are set up as separate entities.
I get that,
Yep,
but you
so
have relationships. You talk about relationships.
Yes.
I don't want to waste time. I know what Nacho is. I'm understanding about why the people that you talk about relationships.
We can wait for the officials to finish their question before we jump in over the top of them. That would be helpful. So, Ms Turner, if you can complete your answer, that would be great.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Barrett, Assistant Secretary, First Nations Health Division. Thank you for the question, Senator. I think it's important to understand that part of running an Aboriginal health service is that you receive funding from a number of different organisations, and so what the department monitors closely is the expenditure against our grant agreements and the services that we fund them to provide. We don't have a full picture necessarily of all of the funding going into an organisation or all of the expenditure going out. So in this particular instance, it's not clear that the travel or any of the other expenses that have been brought up through the media were actually paid out of the money that we provide them to provide healthcare services in that area.
So where's the audit that you actually decided to do? Can you provide that? Can you table that?
So
that we understand
we probably could. We have
the
received,
extent of problems here.
We received it on Thursday. We haven't.
Yeah, we haven't actually analysed it as yet, but we have received the audit. So yes, we could we can table that for you. Yes.
So you can table that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can. It's worth flagging that the audit may not go to all of the expenditure by, funding provided by other parties. But certainly it will look at our funding.
Yeah, so it looks at the Indigenous Australians Health Program.
But it is fair to say that your department is the biggest funder, and can you tell me how much money you funded them in the year in which your audit was relevant?
In the year that since we've started the audit?
Considering we're talking about many millions in this year, I'm wanting to understand how many millions went to this organisation. Well, there were clearly
I don't have that figure on me at the moment. I can get that for you
take that on notice.
very quickly.
We can have that to you very quickly, though.
So you've got this organisation in administration right now. Who's on the board? Are they the same people?
Yes.
Yes,
primarily.
they currently are, yes.
Yes.
They're the same people that have been in this organisation at the time in which there were issues, and they're still sitting on this board. And your department, this is the timeline, so just you can say the yes and no, is still giving money, I know there's an administrator there, but to this organisation.
So, yes, we are still paying that service to provide healthcare services. It's held in trust as per the grant administration arrangements, but it is also worth flagging that through the audit and through the allegations, we don't actually know that anything untoward has happened. We're simply looking to get a feel for and ensure that we're improving grant management processes.
Okay, I'm going to just put it out there. When you look at some of the boards of these Aboriginal health services, no wonder the gap is not closing. They are run like family businesses. You don't have to be that clever to see it. You don't have to be that clever to look at the annual reports and see there are questions to be answered. I'm wanting to understand what it is about the department, including NIAA, which also funds these organisations. They can't see that. Or are you just not prepared to act on it? Which is it? I'm trying to understand it.
We, in partnership with NACCHO and our NACCHO affiliates in each of the states and territories, do undertake a lot of work to support the capacity building of these organisations to improve their governance and financial management. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is these are community-controlled organisations, and so, they may not always have a nuanced understanding of their fiduciary and governance
so you've just mentioned NACCHO, which is what I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
They're part of delivering improved governance, and yet this comes as a surprise to people. Please help me understand how that happens.
I think what Mr. Barrett and others are trying to say is that there is a genuine objective here of having greater Aboriginal control of these health organisations. There is an acknowledgement that some of the governance practices and the capacity needs to be built, and we lean into building that. The example here is that when it's been brought to people's attention, we have done an audit to understand whether the money is still being used for the right purposes. I think what Mr Barrett is saying is we haven't stopped funding those services. First of all, I presume, because those services are pretty important for the community on an ongoing basis, and often there are not alternate providers that can be turned on in these thin markets and for these communities. And that also we haven't got the final, and we haven't analysed the audit to determine whether there was inappropriate use of the funds that we've provided to provide those services. So I do think there is a balance here that is trying to be struck in line with the closing the gap agenda and the priority, the 4 priorities, one in particular with greater Aboriginal control, that we can't, as a department, take a view that every time we become aware of something that's not, gold-plated or perfect governance, or a situation that could be improved, we suddenly completely turn off the tap and then move to a different form of arrangement that undermines community control. That's essentially, I think, how the department approaches these questions. But we take seriously any allegations of misappropriation of funds, because we think that's very important to deal with that, to give confidence to the sector.
So, Mr Cromley...
Can I just make the point that that is very... Oh, sorry. I might just wait till someone's turned off someone's Instagram reel. Sorry. I just want to sort of reiterate that word. I think it's very important to establish that these are allegations. I know
I've
you've
said
got
that
several
times.
But the department has to treat those allegations as allegations and not findings at this point.
So, as you're doing, this organisation is in administration, there are people whose health have been affected. Have you done an assessment, or have you had the administrator look at more than just the impact on the finances and the financial security potentially of this organisation? Have you also looked at the duty of care when this service was clearly in trouble to the very people who we're trying to close the gap for? I want to understand, are you doing work to understand if there's been any adverse health impacts as a consequence of a health service that's not delivering to a standard that I think any of us would have expected?
Senator, thanks for the question. We work very closely with the Community Grants Hub at DSS and with the AHMRC, the Nacho Peak in New South Wales, and we understand that there's been no impact to service delivery. The client numbers and the episodes of care have not decreased, and despite allegations in the paper that the books had closed, we've received assurances from the organisation that that is no longer the case.
So you'll be looking into how many people didn't get the dental care that they were expecting from a dental service if it was in fact closed, because that's the allegation, or who couldn't be serviced by a doctor when they had significant health issues because there was only one doctor. That's another allegation. You'll be looking at those things and asking the community to give you some feedback about that, since we're so interested in consultation.
The Community Grants Hub and the HMRC both absolutely speak to community members, but it is also worth flagging separately. In many of these organisations, there are considerable recruitment and retention issues, and they impact on the ability for some of these services to provide the number of services that they would like to.
Okay, thank you. Since we're talking about these community-controlled health organisations that we just seem to be blindly supporting despite some of the evidence of concerns, let's talk about Wellington Aboriginal Health Service. Happy to keep going. Wellington Aboriginal Health Service. You fund that as well?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
So how about you tell me where they're currently at in terms of the operation of a critical primary health care service for people whose health is a significant issue in this country. The gap is not closing.
Wellington Aboriginal Corporation Health Service, or WACS, is currently under special administration by ORIC. We understand that there are significant board and governance issues in that organisation as well. At the moment, we are working with WACS to look at a longer-term governance arrangement, and we're hoping that we can set up a new organisation in that area to take over the service delivery, because there's been some conflict between the board, essentially, two factions of the board.
Okay, so this is another one under special administration. Do you know if the same people are currently on the board of that organisation now?
Compared to,
or during that period that these issues existed, or even if any of those people who are on the board actually have clinical qualifications or governance qualifications or any qualifications that are relevant to sitting on the board. I know people are well-meaning and they want to participate, but we're talking about medical issues here.
I understand that there has been some turnover on the board at WACS, but certainly the board is supported by very senior medical staff and practice managers and so on, so they don't necessarily always have clinical backgrounds.
So this has been under special administration since August 2025. When was the last time that you provided funding to that organisation?
We would have provided funding since it's been under special administration from ORIC.
So was that before August or after August?
We would check the dates, but my assumption is that we probably have made one recently.
Because it's currently under a grant.
Yeah.
Do you think it might have been July? Is that possible? Can you have a look at Grant Connect? It's pretty quick. If I had my phone, I could probably have a look now.
I'm conscious July is before it went into special administration in August, but it
so
could
special administration in August, is it possible that you paid money in July?
Yes.
Yes. Possible.
So I did ask a question at the last Senate estimates about the process that you used to identify the health and governance of organisations, and I got this response, and it was that grant assessment and selection processes include the following steps. I mean, you gave it to me, so I probably don't need to give it back to you. There are mandatory questions about history of fraud, corruption, non-compliance with government programs or grant agreements, whether in the last 5 years people have been involved in issues of governance, financial distress, legal proceedings, significant events that affected their capacity. And this is a bit of a self-check list. They can sign that off. Would you say in this case, did people sign off on that from Wellington and from the other health organisation? Can you confirm that for me?
It's worth reiterating that WACS or Wellington is under special administration from ORIC, not from the department, so we wouldn't have gone through
okay, but my point is,
that process.
You told me that that's what you use.
Yep.
They sign that off and say, yes, we're all good to go. And you've funded these organisations even before you realised you put them into special administration. I'm trying to understand whether you think that's getting you and these people to where they need to get to, given these issues, and I'm assuming you use that for every grant application.
Yeah, so yes, we would use a similar process for other grant applications. We're happy to take on notice what WAC may have filled in on that form, what we knew in advance. We're happy to take that on notice.
Senator Little, we're just 30 seconds away from the hard marker of the evening break. So I'm happy for, if you're wanting to move to the next tranche of questions, that we come back to you after the break. We will now, Sister.
Chair, Senator Little's raised a couple of points in between her questions. I just wanted to reiterate, there's no evidence of systematic failure, and actually there's no indication that First Nations organisations fail at any further degree than other health services, there are robust mechanisms in auditing and reporting in place. And actually the case studies that you've raised, Senator, show that the ability to intervene early and resolve issues is actually there because these robust mechanisms are in place. And I just wanted to put that on the record because I think the department's been dealing with these two case management systems, but it doesn't mean to say that the system itself isn't working.
Okay. We will suspend now until 9:15 and we have an evening break. Feels like the afternoon. We are returning to continue in outcome 1, health policy access and support, and I will give the call to Senator Antic.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've just got some more questions for the TGA. Still here. I don't think he heard me. Sorry, Professor Lawler, sorry.
I don't think they heard you.
No. I was walking in. I saw. Sorry.
Calling the TGA.
I was a bit quick. I was a bit quick.
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yes. Sorry. I was as you were walking in, Professor. Sorry. I want to go back to a topic we touched on during the last round of estimates, just around the issue of testing of the childhood immunisation schedule. And the question I've got relates to the mechanism of testing. So I want to ask this fairly specific question. So if it could be taken as a fairly specific question. Of the vaccines currently on Australia's national immunisation program, the childhood schedule, how many have a complete transitive chain all the way through all prior version comparators that ultimately links back to at least one randomised double-blind pre-licensure trial in which any version of that vaccine was compared directly against a genuine inert saline placebo with at least 12 months of safety follow-up? That's across the entire schedule.
So there's a lot in there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Sorry,
question.
it's a big question.
No, that's fine. So I have online. So we do have a couple of people with us. We have Catherine Gibney, who's co-chair of ATAGI. I don't know, Catherine, whether you'd like to comment. I also have Dr. Daniel Dascombe, I think, online, who works with us in terms of our within the TGA. Catherine, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I think in terms of the number of vaccines and the chain that you've outlined, I think we would have to take that on notice.
Right. Okay. Well, can I then ask, and this is probably a follow-up to the question from the last round, of the vaccines, this is slightly different. On the vaccines currently on the childhood immunisation schedule, which have actually undergone pre-licensure testing, a double-blind placebo-controlled trial using an inert saline placebo, which is a little bit different to the first question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to call I was going to give you my name tag then. Dr. Andrew Pengilly up, who's one of our medical officers.
Sorry, I just ran up the stairs. Dr. Andrew Pengilly, I'm one of the medical officers at the Medicines Regulation Division. So sorry, Senator, I was just coming into the room when you asked your question. It relates to placebo-controlled trials.
Sorry, you want to hear it again? Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
So this is slightly different to the first question. Of the vaccines currently on the Australian childhood immunisation schedule, which have undergone pre-licensure testing in a double-blind placebo-controlled trial using an inert, like saline placebo?
Yeah. Well, I think we did answer this question on notice after the last session, so that our answers in that regard are in writing. But the current products haven't been tested in, as you say, inert placebo-controlled trials because, as was explained in the last session, it's unethical, amongst other things, to do trials when there's an existing standard of care, and so they have been done in randomised controlled, active controlled trials, which are equally statistically robust. All of the vaccines underwent placebo-controlled trials at some point during their development, but some of these vaccines, of course, were developed quite some time ago. Polio, 1954, diphtheria vaccine, 1932, which is actually before randomised controlled trials were invented. So the ones that have actually undergone placebo-controlled trials with inert placebos are one where they were introduced and there wasn't an existing standard of care. And clear examples of that are, say, rotavirus vaccine, pneumococcal vaccine, there was randomisation and control of the switch to the acellular pertussis vaccine, but not the other elements of that vaccine. So the ones where there wasn't an existing standard of care have undergone inert placebo-controlled trials. Others have undergone placebo-controlled trials often a long time ago when they were developed, and the modern formulations have undergone active control trials because there was an existing standard of care, and it's unethical to perform trials in any other way.
Can you explain active control trials? That's quite different.
Not really. Placebo really just refers to a control arm in which the control does not exert any action over the disease being tested. Now, that can either be an inert placebo, like saline, or it can be an active placebo, for example, a DTP toxin in a meningitis trial. DTP doesn't do anything to meningitis, so it's a valid placebo. The choice of whether to use an inert placebo or an active placebo is not a statistical one, it's a methodological one, and it really relates to whether it's ethical, but also whether it answers the clinical question that's of interest. We generally want to know whether something we're introducing is better than what we've got already. And in that case, we use controls that are active. The other reason you would use placebo-controlled trials is when you're concerned about the placebo effect, which is, a subjective improvement that occurs, and that can be important for things like depression studies, pain studies, and so forth. But in vaccine-controlled trials, it's not much of an issue because somebody's mental state isn't going to control whether they seroconvert to a disease. I would point out, though, that the idea that inert placebo-controlled trials are some sort of gold standard is not true. It's not true in the literature, but it also manifestly isn't true because if it was, we'd be using them for all diseases. And nobody's ever asked us why we don't do them for cancer trials, for example. The reason is if you give people with advanced cancer placebos, half your patients die. And the same argument really relates to their use in vaccine trials, which is the ethical need to establish the use of the vaccine against an existing standard of care and the ethical concern not to do any harm to the people in the trial.
Okay, can I ask you on a different subject on the issue of puberty-blocking drugs? The 19th of November, this is just generally to the TGA, whoever can take it, the US Department of Health and Human Services published a report titled Treatment for Paediatric Gender Dysphoria, Review of Evidence and Best Practices. It's a 400-page peer-reviewed report outlining the dangers posed to children from attempts to change their biological sex and the harms from puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and the like. On that same day, November 19, that's only a couple of weeks ago, or whatever we're up to now, the New Zealand government officially banned the new prescribing of puberty blockers for children, released a brief citing a lack of good, this is a quote, a lack of good quality evidence to back the effectiveness and safety of puberty blockers, and they now join the UK, Finland, Norway, Sweden, all of whom have decided to limit new prescriptions of puberty blockers, while in Australia and most states and territories it's continuing and being prescribed off-label. Why is it continuing to be permitted to use off-label prescribing of puberty blockers in Australia when all other countries that I've just mentioned have banned those activities? Is there something that we know that they don't?
So thank you for that question, Senator. And you've highlighted the fact that we only have a small number of GnRH analogues that are registered for use in the ARTG, and they are in children only registered for use for the treatment of central precocious puberty. And you've highlighted that off-label use of medications on the register, which is a common practice within the Australian health system, is utilised for the treatment for other purposes. In terms of the conditions that are being treated, I'll pass to Professor Kidd.
Well, Senator, as you know, the National Health and Medical Research Council is currently developing guidelines on the use of puberty blockers in transgender and gender diverse young people. I'm not sure if the NHMRC would like to talk to this, but we've been advised that interim advice is to be expected in mid-next year.
That's a long time, though, when other countries are removing these medications from circulation for fear of what they're doing to our kids. How is it we're continuing to use them in circumstances when, other countries, have they got it wrong? Norway, UK and the others?
This is a complex and evolving issue, as I think Mr Butler has also said very recently. Puberty blockers, as we know, can be life-saving care for many young transgender people, and even each time we raise this issue in this forum, we know that it leads to distress among some of those people who already experience stigma and discrimination and are subjected to mental health risks. As with any other medical treatment, there's a balance of risks and benefits with these treatments, and the people who are receiving the treatments currently in Australia, the standard of care that we'd expect is that there are discussions with their treating clinicians about those risks and benefits related to the science of what we know and the evidence that's emerging in other parts of the world.
Why are they being allowed to be used off-label when the TGA was so adamant that ivermectin, for example, during COVID could not be used off-label?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for that question. I will admit that the decisions and conversations around the use of ivermectin predated my arrival at the TGA, but I was working within state health systems at the time, and my understanding is that the qualitative difference between the two situations that we're discussing is that, firstly, given the strong weight of evidence that ivermectin was not an effective preventative or curative treatment for COVID-19, meant that it was being used by individuals who would be much better placed to be seeking appropriate treatment for COVID-19, and also there was a great concern that it would not be available for its actual approved use, which is an antihelminthic or a treatment for worms.
Is that not the case with puberty blockers, though? If we're using them off-label for one purpose, we're no concern that they won't be available for their scripted use?
As has been mentioned a couple of times tonight, Senator, as a regulator, we are engaged in the business of balancing risk, and that includes the risk of individuals being able to access medicines versus the safety, quality and efficacy of those medicines.
Okay, well, on that subject, I want to take you to the issue of COVID-19 vaccine-reported deaths in children. And I think you will probably note that recently the Director of the Centre for Biologics Evaluation and Research and Chief Medical Officer of the FDA, Dr. Vinay Prasad, admitted that staff at the Office of Biostatistics and Pharmacovigilance had found that at least 10 children died after and because of receiving a COVID-19 vaccination. He said these deaths are related to vaccination. That number is certainly an underestimate due to underreporting and attribution. They were between 21 and 24, and I understand that only in Australia, only 2 fatal cases from 160 in 2022, and none of those children who died in Australia in 2022 were referred to the vaccine, the VSIG, the Vaccine Safety Investigation Group. And there was a similar failure to refer them in 2021. Why was that?
Thank you, Senator. Look, as I've mentioned previously, the decisions and determinations of the FDA and the CDC really matters for the US administration. We are not, it is my understanding, I'm happy to be corrected by Dr. Dascombe, I'll ask him to comment in a moment. We've not been provided with the information that the statements or assertions by the staff within the US FDA are basing that determination. As has been highlighted previously, we do have a rigorous process of the assessment of the causal relationship between vaccines and reported injuries. We've highlighted previously that that's not around the determination of the cause of death, that is around the identification of any causal link between the vaccine and any reported injury. Dr. Dascombe, I believe you're online, if you'd like to comment.
Yes, hello there. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Professor Lawler. Thank you, Senator, for your question. Dr. Daniel Dascombe, Acting Principal Medical Advisor in the Pharmacovigilance Branch at the TGA. I'll just add on to the statements there from Professor Lawler, just to speak to some of our process internally within the branch, Senator, that goes to your question. So, just to reiterate some of the statements there from Professor Lawler, the causality assessment undertaken by our branch really is primarily concerned with the relationship between the vaccine administered and the adverse event that led to death. The TGA has no role in determination of death. That is appropriately left to coroners and treating health professionals. The TGA can convene the Vaccine Safety Investigation Group. This is a time-limited group of independent experts to conduct a formal causality assessment. And that's where a single adverse event report has the potential to change the entire positive risk balance, benefit risk balance, I should say, of the vaccine. It should be noted that there are other methods by which the TGA can critically appraise the relationship between a vaccine and an adverse event. This includes the application of clinical and scientific expertise internally within the TGA without progressing to formal causality assessment via a VSIG. During the early years of the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines in Australia, the TGA convened a VSIG several times, for example, for conditions such as myocarditis or TTS associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. This was because some of the risk-benefit profile of COVID vaccines was still being characterised at that early stage in the vaccine rollout. And the potential impact of these adverse events on the risk-benefit balance for those vaccines was unknown at that time. As time's progressed, the safety profile of these vaccines has become better established. And the grounds for establishing a VSIG to look into specific case reports have changed over time.
Can I ask...
Just flagging, this is the last question.
How many of the 1,053 deaths reported on the DAN system have had causality assessments done? How many have been referred to VSIG, and where can we access those reports?
I'd be happy to take that question on notice, Senator, and come back to you because it's a highly specific question and deserves a very specific answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to turn to Lyme disease, build on questions earlier tonight. For several decades, the risk of harm of tick-borne diseases has been recorded, published, reported and presented to the Department of Health and the Minister's Office and advisors at the time, some done even through the government's own infectious disease bulletins. Doctors are verifying Lyme disease in Australia. Who answers this question? Who's going to answer this question about Lyme disease?
We had some officials here earlier, so just give them a
full
chance.
Room.
No, it's okay.
It's a full room. They've had it. Hi.
Sorry, we're just coming in.
No, that's fine.
Oh, sorry, we're just in another room. I'll just have to turn off. Sorry about that. We're just in the next room.
Do you need to give? They need to give their names.
Good evening, Senator.
I think repeating the question would be helpful, Senator Roberts.
Okay. I want to build on Lyme disease questions that were asked earlier on. Excuse me. For several decades, the risk of harm of tick-borne diseases has been recorded, published, reported and presented to the Department of Health and the Minister's Office and advisors at the time, some done even through the government's own infectious disease bulletins. Doctors are verifying Lyme disease, we've heard that anecdotally, in Australia. I'm going to talk about epidemiological studies later and records that the department has. But in the meantime, could you please specify the dates and events that the evidence of harm of tick-borne diseases has been presented to the department and what actions have been taken to protect Australians historically? On notice, if you like.
Yes, thank you, Senator. We'll take that on notice.
I acknowledge that in 2016 and 2025, we had very limited Senate inquiries into Lyme disease and tick-borne diseases. The terms of reference were very vague, the recommendations were vague, the implementation I'm going to ask about. At least the term was recognised, tick-borne diseases. We still don't know the full extent and the nature of the entire tick-borne disease problem. Why haven't these tick-borne disease infections been quantified with a study of the population in the form of a human epidemiological study? There are a lot of people suffering.
We answered quite a lot of these questions before.
Not these exactly.
No, but there has been a study that's been done. Anyway, I'll let the officials answer. We're just going back over
epidemiological.
Not one of those types, but.
No, Senator, but I'm happy to be corrected, but we'll take that on notice.
So, as far as you know, no studies have been done epidemiologically.
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Why is the Public Health Laboratory Network's own diagnosis data being ignored with these diseases when they hold results of thousands of test results for tick-borne disease?
Senator Rajan Martin, Assistant Secretary, Communicable Diseases Policy Branch. I'm not aware of any data, or I'm not aware of the data that you referred to being withheld. Some of the tick-borne diseases are notifiable, and we do collect information on those. I think one of the challenges is that there are a range of conditions which patients believe may be caused by ticks, but where there's, as I mentioned in an earlier answer, there's not necessarily evidence that the pathogen that would cause that disease is present in Australia. So I think that's where it's challenging to collect information where we don't have that causal pathway.
Have you been given or have you collected samples?
Sorry, samples of
infection.
So there are established diagnostic tests for different tick-borne diseases, Senator.
I think the evidence that was attended earlier, Senator, was that the bacteria that caused the Lyme disease hasn't been detected in Australia. It's not that there aren't people who contract it overseas and come here. There's also evidence that there are other tick-borne diseases that are prevalent in Australia or present in Australia, but not Lyme disease for the bacteria that's required to be the cause of the disease.
I'll say it again, I don't understand the exact health system, but why is the Public Health Laboratory Network's own diagnosis data being ignored with these diseases when they hold the results of thousands of test results for tick-borne disease? Why is that being ignored? What's been done with it? What's going to be done with it?
I think we're struggling to describe which laboratories you're talking about. If you could provide evidence of that, and we're happy to take on notice where there is any evidence to that effect in Australia. I think the evidence tendered earlier in this estimate session was that there wasn't such evidence in Australia, but we're happy to take that on notice.
I'm told that there is evidence held by the Public Health Laboratory Network's own data.
Well, we'll take that on notice, Senator. Unless CMO would like to comment?
Well, Senator, there is evidence of tick-borne infectious diseases that have been that people have contracted in Australia, and there are a number of those infections which are recorded, which people are tested for. Some of the rickettsial infections, Queensland tick typhus, Flinders Island spotted fever, Australian spotted fever, Q fever due to Coxiella burnetii. There's data on each of these particular tick-borne diseases, which will be in our laboratory systems and which are brought together. The issue about Lyme disease, we've talked about that before.
Well, I understand also, I'm told that hospitals have discharge records with some stating tick-borne illness, Lyme disease, Babesia, Rickettsia, Bartonella, etc. Yet accurate and reliable testing for all these diseases in Australia does not occur. Can this be quantified? Are you able to provide a quantification of this? This is a public health threat.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to take that on notice from the PHLN.
I understand. Why can't the study of this data for all vector-borne diseases, part of the responsibility of the Department of Health from the 2016 Senate inquiry, be done to complete an epidemiological study? Can you take that on notice?
Yes, we have.
We can. Senator, I think it might take me a moment to find it, but I think the government's response to the most recent inquiry does go into the feasibility of, it's not feasible necessarily to collect data on everyone who may have been bitten by a tick in Australia. We do have a system around notifiable diseases where that is nationally collected and reported upon for particular pathogens. But yeah, I can take on notice and provide further information on some of those practicalities.
So we've got animals, readily available tick-borne disease testing panels in Australia for livestock and domestic animals, and I'm told especially for export, so we don't want to hurt people overseas. Veterinarians know that sometimes it's necessary for animals sick with tick-borne disease to be put down. So it seems like, well, the question is raised, are we doing nothing about humans? Are we going to start putting humans down? That's being far-fetched, of course, but what I'm saying is nothing seems to be done. There are lots and lots of people, Minister, who are sick and crippled with this.
Perhaps you could put a question to the officials that they can answer for
on
you.
my frustration.
You can express your frustration in the Senate chamber next year.
I haven't got Lyme disease, but I know people who have, and I know people who've got tick-borne diseases, and there's been no epidemiological study done. This has been going on for decades.
There's been inquiries, responses to those inquiries, and the officials have answered your questions.
I know you, Senator Green, you would not be proud of the studies that have been done in the 2016
I'm very aware of the
inquiry.
inquiries. I know a lot of good senators from this place have been involved in those inquiries and taking evidence from people who are affected, and the government's responded to those inquiries.
So what I'd just say again, why can't the study of this data for all vector-borne disease as part of the responsibility of the Department of Health be done to complete an epidemiological study? So you've taken that on notice.
Taken that on notice for you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm early this time.
You are early this time. I'm very grateful for that, Senator Roberts. Senator Little.
Thank you. I'd just like to go back to the topic I was talking about earlier, which is actually about medical services and optimal service delivery. It's also about two organisations which are in administration at this time, and taxpayers' money being used wisely and effectively, and the rigorous evaluation system that the department has that we clearly need to do some work in looking at, because we've got here in front of us two organisations that are currently in administration. You said to me before, and I was trying to listen to all the detail, in terms of Coonamble, you've got an audit report that landed yesterday that is about Coonamble. Is that correct? Okay.
Thursday, sorry.
Sorry, Thursday.
Thursday last week. So has somebody actually looked at that yet? So
not as yet. It's actually with our
fraud investigation branch.
Yeah, they're looking at it at the moment.
Right.
So people are looking at it in the department. It just hasn't come back to the First Nations area.
Right, and you don't have those people here tonight?
I don't think so. They're not under this out.
And it would take longer than a few days to analyse properly.
Okay, so the issues that I raised that I don't know whether they're part of or not part of what led to you seeking an audit. But one of the things that jumped out as an allegation was that between 21 and 23, there was an overseas trip, or several overseas trips, that amounted to $400,000 that included destinations like Bali, India, Canada and Las Vegas. Can you confirm that that is also part of that investigation and you have in your hands now if that actually occurred?
Senator, I think we have to be careful. It's an open investigation at the moment, so I don't think we're really in a position to go into exactly what the scope of that investigation is. We've confirmed there's been an audit of the organisation. We're analysing in our fraud and compliance area, and we'll have to go through that before we think about what the right course of action is.
You funded that organisation, even though it's now in administration. Did you advise the minister that there were some issues, or that there was not just an organisation under administration, but that you'd done an audit? Does the minister have to sign off on that funding that went to this organisation?
Sorry,
is that a departmental? Does the department sign off on that funding when you've gone through your rigorous processes and determined that it should get that funding, or does the minister have to sign off on anything, or is it just a departmental thing that gets done?
Initially, when the funding was approved, it would have gone to the minister, but that was in 2024 and before any of these allegations were had.
And did you alert the minister that there might have been issues with this organisation, that you were looking at this organisation, you were going to do an audit, this organisation was in administration?
That's not the timeline that the officials mentioned, but we can step you through it if you like.
Yes, but this is an organisation that's been funded over a lengthy period, including right up until, including in 2025, just a few months ago. So I'm wondering whether, at what point you advised the minister that you were going to fund an organisation that not only was in administration, but was also subject to an audit, a forensic audit.
I think what Mr Barrett said is that the minister would have signed off on the funding in 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The forensic audit has been commissioned sometime after that, when the allegations have come to light. So we wouldn't have been able to obviously advise the Minister of the forensic audit before it actually commenced.
Okay.
And perhaps I just might ask the people to comment. You made reference to the due diligence check that we do before we fund people. Often that's a question of whether they've been providing services for a significant period of time. Maybe Mr Barrett might want to comment the period that this organisation has been providing services in their community in broad terms.
Absolutely, thanks. So Coonamble's been providing services to this community and the region for over 20 years. They have a stellar track record. The other point I would make is that although we did provide information to the Minister's office in response to the media article, we didn't provide any advice about the grant administration or the financial audit. It's fairly routine in these instances.
Right.
Yeah, so Senator, we have it's in their grant agreements that we can put in a grant administrator. That is actually the decision of the Community Grants Hub and the department to do that.
Okay. So people who are clients of any organisation are generally the least powerful in any process. Did your process of checking ensure that there was a complaints process that included some mechanism for people to feel comfortable in a community where you've been delivering a service and you rely on that service for 20-something years, that if you made a complaint that you could feel safe, that you weren't going to be impacted because you lodged a complaint? Did that organisation or the other organisation that is in administration have an independent complaints process that was accessible, available and communicated to people who were using that service? I'm assuming that's part of your process too.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely have complaints handling processes both through NACHO, the Community Grants Hub, the AHMRC, and then ORIC and or ASIC, depending on who they're incorporated with.
So will the work that you're doing now to understand what's happened also look at what's happened with the department?
As in the notification process?
Yes.
No, it won't.
The systems process, the complaints process, your auditing process, your grants administration process?
No, it's just looking at Coonamble and the financial requirements, the audit around Coonamble.
But naturally, if we conduct an audit to a particular organisation and it throws up what we think are systemic issues, then we would take that into account when designing future grant processes as part of our ordinary course of affairs. So it would be common for our fraud and compliance area or a policy area to draw some both the specific conclusions but raise questions whether the general control framework is adequate, which would then be brought attention to people within the department to build it into future processes.
So we can have confidence that the process will also look at an improvement within the department to try and reduce the incidents?
Well, we're always looking, Senator, for improvements within the department, and what we're always then trying to make sure is that balance between taking our specific incidents that brings things to light, but not then, for example, imposing quite onerous restrictions across a large number of other things within the departments, because we're forever trying to balance that need to protect the public interest, the public purse and the health outcomes that you've been talking about, but also to do such in a way that doesn't have such an onerous burden of administration that it makes it difficult, particularly for organisations that don't have the same scale or sophistication of others. And that's true both in the First Nations space, but also outside the First Nations space.
So for all organisations that the Commonwealth currently funds that receive funding for the benefit of improving Aboriginal health outcomes, Torres Strait Islander health outcomes, are there any more that you're aware of? We're just talking here about two examples of organisations that are in administration that deliver services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Are there any more that you're aware of at this point in time that are either under investigation by any regulator, under investigation by police, under investigation by any mechanism of the Commonwealth at this point in time that are funded by your department?
So, Senator, we can only talk to the Indigenous Australians Health Program and the organisations that we fund under that program, and we can let you know that we currently have
We have one other organisation under grants administration, and they've been complying with the business improvement plan that's been developed in partnership with them, and they are due to roll off grants administration on 31 December.
So just to be clear, sorry, I think you told me in the break there are 135 organisations that we are currently funding.
Yep.
So I think it is quite important to put that into context, and both in this sector but in other sectors, it is not uncommon that someone goes into administration at some point in time who's receiving government funding. It's also not uncommon, by the way, that they continue providing those services while under administration, and there is often some orderly transition of those organisations. So that is important. You made a comment about police inquiries. It's quite obviously police almost invariably here is a state or territory based policing activity, and they would not routinely advise us of a police inquiry depending on the nature of it that would come to us. They may if they thought it was appropriate, but they often have other reasons they're investigating. So I think it would be unlikely we would get police information as part of that input.
So when you go through this process here that you've explained in the last Quan, is that only given to a board or the CEO once to sign off, even if they've got a grant process that might go over 4 years or for 4 years?
Yeah, they were typically done at the initiation of the grant. Obviously, often Mr Barrett or Ms Turner might want to comment, often the grant agreements will have obligations with advisors where there is a change in circumstances. And again, we're trying to strike that balance between onerous administration and whether, compared if we went, for example, back and audited everyone every year to see where that occurred. Where we strike the balance at the moment is to ask them to self-report whether there's a change in circumstances that we should be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
It's just worth flagging that we actually have very close relationships with, as I said before, NACCHO, regulatory bodies, the NIAA, and NACCHO affiliates. So we do hear a lot of intelligence and feedback from the community and from organisations. This is the pointy end of some of the more complex issues that we hear about and face, but actually there's a lot of really good organisations out there.
Right. So I'd like to move on at the moment to the funding by Department of Health of what is called yarning circles. Can we have a conversation about those, please?
Oh, yeah. I think that's mental health.
Somebody who could explain the nature of the proliferation of some of these yarning circles and what happens with them.
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, let me help you with that.
Yeah.
So I understand the Department of Health has spent $800,000 on projects such as Yarning Through Pain, a pilot study of 3 new strategies to improve Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander pain care. Not yours?
So I'm not aware of those. I'm just wait and see whether my team will probably advise me reasonably soon, I'd imagine, if we can find some.
I think Duncan, Mr Young might have.
Yeah, it's not one that I'm aware of in our space.
Okay.
Senator Duncan Young, First Assistant Secretary, Health Economics and Research Division. I'm aware of we have a range of research funding provided out through several measures for Indigenous organisations and also organisations which are providing support for Indigenous health and wellbeing. I believe some of those do involve yarning programs, but depending on the nature of a question, I might have to take it on notice because we do have over 1,800 grants that we've issued through the Medical Research Future Fund, and so I don't have all of the details of those.
Okay. I've got from Grant Connect a number which are from the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing that are all about, they start with yarning through pain. I think there's pride yarns. There's a whole list of them that are in there. What I'm actually interested in understanding is what the nature of those programs are, and whether in fact when those programs are funded, there is clinically or professional people who are accredited and trained to do that work, or whether it's just people who are providing a service to help people to work through these things.
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Questions on individual programs and grants that we can take on notice and provide what detail we can. What I can assure you of is the rigorous evidence-based processes we go to with the Medical Research Future Fund. We have an appointed Medical Research Advisory Board that develop the strategy and the priorities for how the Medical Research Future Fund should be invested in priority-driven research. And then through that, we have set up a range of different grant opportunities over a period of time. And for each one of those grant opportunities, there will be expert advisory groups which are involved with the grant assessment, so a rigorous competitive process to consider applications for those grants, and they'll consider a range of criteria around the potential value of the outcome, the qualifications of the researchers that are applying for it to undertake the work, and how those grants will be managed across the course of the research.
Mr Young, are you able to, you're talking in very general terms because you said that you're not really sure about each of those. I'm particularly interested in understanding for those grants that were given out that there is actually, that when you're dealing with people who present to those programs because there may be issues of significant trauma, mental health, FASD, addiction, all sorts of things, what I'm looking for is clarification and confirmation that about what the definition of yarning circles are under this program, and that this is being treated and funded for serious professional clinical responses to help people to move from where they find themselves. Not simply a yarning circle, because we do have some things that are funded that essentially are just that.
Senator, I think probably if it's in the research space, it would be the bit of the yarning circles, I'd assume, probably under the banner of research. So it'd be sort of yarning circles to contribute probably as part of a research project. I'm just checking with the team. Doesn't look like it's something we're funding from a program way. That would be from a sort of, done as a sort of normal way we'd run a program from a therapeutic point of view, or to engage people as part of addressing things. So they'll probably confirm. But if
perhaps, Senator, what we could do, you've made reference to grants on the Grants Hub. We can check ourselves references to yarning on the Grants Hub. We're happy to take on notice, and I understand your question to be what is the detail of the program that's been done, and particularly what is the level of clinical oversight or input to understanding the evidence base associated with that yarning approach. Is that a fair summary of what you're asking for?
That is it, because I get asked by people about these glossy brochures about yarning circles, and they ask, well, what's the outcome as a consequence of participation, and what's the evidence base that is the response that people actually need, and what's the professional intervention to give the best possible chance of that response.
So we'll take that on notice, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Little, just for seeking some clarity, did you have a document that you wanted to table? Was that something that you were reading from in relation to the grants, or? No,
that's from the Grants Hub. It's available to the department.
I'm just checking, that's all.
No, they can get that off the Grants Hub.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also need to move the call, so can I ask Senator Roberts to now take the call
for a little while, and I'll come back to you, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I need to ask some questions, Minister, about the recent enabling legislation for the CDC.
Yes, we'll bring people to the table for the CDC.
Okay, I note the enabling legislation for the CDC received royal assent 3 weeks ago, so I am surprised to see you here so quickly.
Is that a question? Senator, my name
How long have preparations for the CDC been going on?
The commitment by the government to create an Australian Centre of Disease Control was made in the election before the one last held. So
2022.
Yeah.
Yes, 2022.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. How much was spent preparing for an Australian CDC prior to the legislation passing Parliament?
Senator, the preparation activity for the CDC is one of the activities undertaken in the interim CDC group. So there's a lot of different activities. We could probably give a funding amount for one of the divisions which is largely responsible for the establishment activities. So that's the policy development and the drafting of the legislation and the staffing considerations associated with setting up a new agency. We could probably take that on notice, but it's not a figure I have.
So take it on notice to find out how much is spent in a parallel agency or department.
The interim CDC is part of the department at the moment, and we can certainly take you through the high-level budget descriptions for that group and the activities, inclusive of which is establishment activities for the statutory agency.
Now, this may be a guess. Was it around 250 million?
Yeah, so...
take it on notice.
Ms Grimberg's going to tell me there are actually 3 tranches of funding that came through budget and MyEFO measures, and Ms Grimberg's comment, I think that number is broadly correct.
250 is broadly correct?
Yeah. That's correct.
Over 4 years, not a single year.
Yeah. So that's a lot of money. So it's not really enabling legislation.
Well, let's go back
a lot of money
step.
spent on it.
There's functions and then there's legislation. So the CDC was an election commitment by the government in 2022. There was work immediately commenced on what it would look like. There was already a public, for want of a public health group within the department did some of this work, some of which had been built up through COVID and the pandemic response. And then there was, some of those functions continued, but some money has also been appropriated to build up new functions of the CDC, such as data integration and surveillance systems, which will prepare Australia better for a pandemic. The legislation has the effect, though, of creating an independent body. And so there's probably 2 different things here. One is what is the functions of the CDC, much of which transfers from the existing department. And the second is what is the legislative basis on which it operates. And in particular, is the CDC and in particular the Director General of the CDC independent of government when providing advice.
Thank you. That was an excellent summary. Director, who's the director? Is there an interim director?
So at the moment, Ms Wood is the interim head of the interim CDC. There has been a selection process that has been undertaken for the new Director General. There has been no decision made as to who that is, bearing in mind that the CDC commences on the 1st of January next year.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Secretary, what is your intent to fund, commission, conduct or cooperate with others on virus research, including what is commonly called gain-of-function research?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As the Secretary's indicated, there will be a Director General set up, commissioned, appointed by the Minister for the CDC once it's a statutory agency. So they'll obviously have the responsibility to determine the work program in detail. So we can take you through the research as a concept under the legislation if that assists.
Yes, please. Gain of function research.
So the CDC won't be, and I think this was indicated earlier, conducting research on matters that are in the remit of other organisations. The CDC is a complement to the Commonwealth public health capability. It will not be taking over or otherwise leaning in on research conducted by any other Commonwealth entities, whether that's in HMRC or the Gene Technology.
So we know
Committee.
that the CSIRO has admitted to gain of function research, and here and in China. Will you assume responsibility for any aspect of the CSIRO's Australian Centre for Disease Preparedness in Geelong?
The CSIRO is obviously a different organisation.
Yep.
The CDC will work with it, but it's the CDC is not inheriting or having functions transferred to it from the CSIRO. If that's the question, Senator.
That is the question.
If I can just add in Senator, the oversight of gain of function research is the responsibility of the Office of the Gene Technology Regulator.
Okay, that's been bandied around as sometimes it's in his purview, sometimes it's not in his purview. So that's in his purview.
Responsibility for the oversight of proposed gain of function research.
Thank you. The CSIRO has a substantial live animal experimentation agenda. Although the animals aren't alive for long, will you sanction live animal experimentation as part of your new role?
Just through the Secretary, I'm not sure, do we have the Office of the Gene Technology Regulator in this section?
I don't think so, but I think the Senator's question goes to a different question, which is more about research methodology. And the other thing, I think the thing I'd comment, and Ms Wood can expand, or the others at the table, it's not envisaged that certainly not envisaged that the CDC would undertake research itself. That's not the primary role of the CDC. And so I don't think it needs to turn its policy mind to that question of animal research.
Okay. Chair, I'll finish early with regards to getting back on the treadmill on the DGO.
All right. You're getting better and better, Senator Roberts. I'm very impressed. Senator Little.
Thank you for you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question again around Indigenous Australians, and understand the department spent $300,000 on monitoring the mental health needs of First Nations people during the Voice to Parliament referendum. Hi, how are you going? What I'm interested in knowing is where that's actually at and how you did that.
That's a good question. I think you have to take that on notice, Senator. It's not something that I've actually come across in the time that I've had in this role, but I'm sure I would hopefully within a short period of time should be able to find you some information about that and come back to you if you can give me a couple of minutes.
Okay. All right.
My recollection is that we actually outsourced that to the ANU.
Yeah, the amount of money rings a bell, and I think it would have been outsourced, but I just need to go and find out for you, Senator, where the process is out and what we've come up to it. It's probably...
You think you can get it to me in the next few minutes?
Yeah, I'll try and chase it up for you right now.
That would be terrific for some details.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a question about Huntington's disease. If somebody can help me with that.
Is there any clue as to what you're...
Yeah, I'm actually interested. It would be Indigenous Australians again.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Yep.
I'm wanting to ask about what we understand about the incidence of Huntington's disease, in particular in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I understand there's reasonably high prevalence within those communities
so I'm just
in certain areas.
thinking, I think, whether the Chief Medical Officer or anyone else had any understanding of... I would need to take that under notice.
Sorry? You have to take that under notice?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just give you a couple of questions to take on notice then.
Sure.
Okay, I'm interested in understanding the prevalence of it and having you confirm that if you understand that. The current response to that prevalence. Who is the main provider of support to people who are actually living with Huntington's? And if there are any plans to, or how it is there is service delivery to people with that dreadful neurological disease. And who is funded, how much they are funded to work with those communities. But you need to tell me first how significant that particularly is.
Can I ask, Senator, are there particular communities you're concerned about?
Well, that's what I'm interested in. It's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I'm interested in understanding what you know about that to confirm what I've been told about that or what I understand about that. I'm not a health expert, so I'm here to ask you questions.
Happy to take that on notice.
Thank you. Thanks, I've got a question about, and I know it was asked very much earlier in the day, about the Commonwealth supported places for Indigenous medical students.
Yes, we have the people here. We didn't actually canvass for Indigenous students.
No,
it was broader.
I realised that, but I couldn't get in earlier, so thank you. And here we are. Thank you. Thank you. I know that 3.2 million over 4 years was allocated in the budget for 5-6 to increase the number of Indigenous doctors entering university. Has that money actually flowed to those universities, and which universities were successful, if it has?
Senator, the budget commitment was to basically uncap CSPs for First Nations students who were eligible or were eligible to enter medicine. In terms of the funding for that and how it flows through to universities, it does start from 2026, and so essentially it means that any First Nations person that is eligible to study medicine, so meets the requirements, will receive a medical school placement, a Commonwealth supported placement.
So I'm interested in the criteria, because that's kind of like open to the world at large, so long as you're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. But what I'm interested in is how much those people make a difference, because other people, we don't want them just in the cities where people get greater choice. So I'm interested in, when you did the criteria, did you break that criteria down or weight it for people from regional and remote areas, gender, mature age students, students who are entering medicine with an undergraduate degree and using that pathway, and any other relevant demographic information you have?
On First Nations. So it is essentially any First Nations person across Australia, regardless of whether they're rural, remote, metro, if they are eligible for, if they meet the criteria for a medical school placement, a Commonwealth supported place, then they will receive a place. We have other criteria around CSPs, additional CSPs that we've provided to universities that are targeted at rural areas. We've also got rural universities. A number of the CSPs that we talked about earlier are going to non-metro universities for additional CSPs, but essentially the First Nations uncapping of CSPs is for any First Nations person who meets the criteria to the eligibility criteria to get into medicine will receive a place regardless of where they live.
Sorry.
And Senator, the funding is it's under the Department of Education, so the Commonwealth Grant Scheme, and I'm sure that the Department of Education would be able to provide more detailed information about how the funding is developed for medical school places.
Because what I'm really trying to get at here is, you can have a whole heap of people going in and studying medicine, but really what we want to see is people who are going into the GP stream, which is critical, and people going into rural and regional areas.
But I think Sorry, Senator.
Yep, no, I'm just interested in understanding what we do to try and ensure that we just don't have more doctors, which is great.
No,
but we have more
absolutely.
doctors in those critical pathway areas that we actually need.
So there is particular funding also going to organisations such as the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association to support doctors and doctors in training for all specialties and in all locations. The universities themselves will provide support, and we also have programs such as the multidisciplinary rural health training program.
Yep, rural health multidisciplinary training program.
Which is also supporting particularly rural medical schools to provide support to rural students, but also to First Nations students.
Right. So when we're talking about medical, we're just talking about doctors. We're not talking about psychologists. We're not talking about...
So the rural medical training program includes, it's a multidisciplinary, so it's not just medical students, it's also nursing, allied health, a range of, and that's in rural areas.
Okay, thank you. I have a question that is about essentially mental health and 1300 yarn, if you've got somebody who can help me with that one. Thank you. Thank you. I'm interested to understand a little bit about a service like 1300 yarn, which I know is very well utilised by Indigenous Australians. I'm particularly interested in with the impending social media ban that's coming into place in a week's time, whether there's been any consideration given to, given the proliferation of the use of social media for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the studies have been done, we know they use it much more than other places, whether any work has been done to understand the implications of that for people who might be trying to access that service, and whether in fact there's been any consideration given to enabling that service to also be able to be a text service so that people can confidentially contact that service for some help. So the implications of the social media ban on a service like that, given the proliferation of social media use in that particular community, and if there's been any consideration of 1300 yarn having a text accessibility for people that would
Mr. Short
contact
might
it.
have some insights.
Yeah, thank you. Matt Short, Assistant Secretary, Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Division. 13 Yarn, we are aware of a request from 13 Yarn for that tech service in relation to support young people through the social media ban. We've started a social media rapid response sort of group with mental health stakeholders, and they are part of that. The first meeting of that is on Friday, and we'll be monitoring the impact of the social media ban on mental health access for young people across Australia, heading into across December and January and onwards. So that starts now, Senator.
Yeah, because the service providers I've been meeting with and the groups of children that come in, that's what they're asking about.
Yep.
How do we actually access health, wellbeing information that is from a reliable source if there's a ban on us being able to access social media?
Yeah, we're very aware of the sector's views on the impact of the ban, and I think we're very closely considering how we get that public health information to all young people across the multiple platforms.
So how quickly do you think you can do that? Because I'm asked today by 3 lots of school groups that came through here today.
How quick? Sorry, Senator.
How quickly can you do that? Because they're wondering, and these are 3 school groups that came through this house today.
How quickly could
How
we
quickly can you get
institute?
information to them about how they access those services that they might. I mean, these are young people, they're teenagers, they're at that point in their life where there's lots of questions that they're asking themselves and want some good advice.
Understood. So questions about the social media ban are really should be directed to the Department of Infrastructure, Communication, Sports and the Arts, but there's been a number of webinars with young people with the sector, which we've been a part of as well, and been working closely with the sector to make sure that the mental health sector is preparing for that social media ban as well, Senator. I understand the concerns, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you. I've got some questions still on the all these acronyms. The IHAP funding. This is the Indigenous Australians Health Program funding. Just the general program funding. I'm wanting somebody who can talk to me about the criteria for the direction of that funding.
Senator, would you like to go before we go into that? Would you like us to just cover the question you were just asking about the referendum related?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Just before you go to that, Senator Little, I'll just flag that I am going to rotate the call to Senator Roberts when you're finished this block.
Thank you.
So, Senator, that does relate to, so there were two amounts of funding provided to the ANU for that work, which is around original tranche of funding of about 0.8 million and then a subsequent amount of money of about 0.5. So a total of 1.3 million provided to the ANU for that work. It was a study that has been looking at really the impacts on mental health both pre-COVID, during COVID and after. There's a series of about 8 reports that are associated with that totality of work. One relates to a focus group that was undertaken by that research centre, and then the other 7 draw from data at different points taken from the Michael Wire study, which, as you might know, is a longitudinal study of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and then that effectively those other 7 reports use that data to assess over different time periods to look at the impact over that period, both pre, during and post-COVID. The reports are available, and summaries of them are available on the ANU's website, which we can probably provide you with the links to those reports to that site.
Right. So, given what you've just told me, is it not really technically correct to call it a study about the voice referendum and its impact, is it?
No, it's not really a study about the referendum. It's really a study of impacts of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, people's sort of well-being and impacts on during that period. It's not really a direct study of the referendum, but it obviously goes over that period in the context of the referendum. Is probably a better way of characterising it.
Okay. And when are we likely to see some information or some conclusions from that work?
So there is information on the ANU's website about those reports, Senator, that we'd be quite happy. I think if we can take this on notice, we can probably give you the links into a question on notice about where you can find the information from those, those reports.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I was ordered to rotate the call.
Senator Roberts, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I reference Freedom of Information 262122, released 30th of September 2025. It's weirdly specific. The minutes of the Pharmaceutical Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee on Prescriptions, I think that's part of the TGA, is that correct?
That sounds to me like PBAC. Was it?
Sorry, can I clarify? Sorry, Senator, can I just clarify which committee you referenced?
Yes, Pharmaceutical Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee on Prescriptions. I'll be coming to the TGA pretty soon.
No, we have a number of advisory committees, but we don't have an advisory committee on prescription. We have an advisory committee on medicines and an advisory committee on vaccines.
Well, perhaps if I give you the question, you might be able to tell me. Held on the 24th of March 2015 regarding the matter of preservatives and single-use injections. The meeting concluded, quote, single-use injections should be preservative-free. If any ingredients are added for a reason other than use as a preservative, the sponsor should provide scientific justification for inclusion at that concentration. End of quote. Now the question is this guideline still current?
I must admit I don't have that document in front of me, Senator. So I'm finding it hard to respond to that on the fly.
Can you take it on notice?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to do that. The best I can take it is that we look to preservatives predominantly for multi-use files, because obviously there's a period between them being used first. But I'm happy to take that on notice and come back to you.
Sounds like the answer to the question, is this guideline still current, is correct, but I'm not going to hold it to you. Thank you for that.
Appreciate that.
Have you allowed any, the next question then is also on notice, have you allowed any single-use injection product to contain preservatives, and were all of those approvals compliant with your own guidelines?
Again, given the first question, I'm happy to respond to that on notice, if that's all right, Senator.
And if you could provide the list of any that were approved. And if you have changed, why did you, if you have allowed single-use injections to contain preservatives, why did you make, why did you make the change to allow preservatives when your expert committee opposed the idea?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Senator. My understanding is that the committee that you're referencing. So, what was the date of the
24th of March 2015? Probably before your time.
Well before my time, Senator. But that is an older committee. I think, in the interest of providing you with a comprehensive response, we'd be happy to roll those up into one response. If that's all right. Thank you.
I'd just like to know if it's still current.
Absolutely.
And then I'd like to know which multi-dose vaccines contain preservatives, and have you obtained safety data to show those preservatives are safe at the levels used?
I don't know whether Dr. There are a number of branches across the TGA, and also potentially a target to which those questions apply, Senator. So,
thank you, Senator, for the question. To the best of my knowledge, the only use of preservatives in multi-use vials is for pandemic vaccines, and that at the moment is the influenza ones. COVID, just for clarity, doesn't contain preservatives. And so we haven't...
It does or doesn't contain?
Does not.
Does not.
I probably can't go into applications we haven't had, but as far as I know, we haven't registered a preservative containing pandemic vaccine, say an H5N1 vaccine.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I'd like to turn to vaccines and autism again. The CDC have changed their guidance in America, have changed their guidance on vaccines and autism. The guidelines now read, and I'm going to quote, "There are still no studies that support the claim that any of the 20 doses of the 7 infant vaccines recommended for the first year of life do not cause autism," end of quote. The American FDA has accepted that vaccines may cause autism because there is no study to show they are safe. Yet I've sat here repeatedly and earlier tonight and been told by the TGA over and over again that they are safe. You can't be right. Either there is proof they are safe or there is not. Which is it?
Thanks for that question, Senator. So discussed this at length with Senator Antic. Yep. The policy decisions and announcements of the FDA are matters for the FDA, and those questions should be directed to them. I would just highlight a couple of things. It is not my understanding that the FDA has said that vaccines cause autism, as I think you outlined in your question.
Correct.
That's not what they've said.
That's correct.
They've not said that vaccines cause autism.
They've said there are still no studies that support the claim that any of the 20 doses of the 7 infant vaccines recommended do not cause autism.
But I think you went on to say at the end of your question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the FDA is thereby saying that vaccines cause autism?
Then I said the FDA, though, has accepted that vaccines may cause autism because there is no study to show they are safe.
Okay. So again, the three-point statement that appeared in November on the CDC's website, which replaced its previous guidance on vaccines and autism, was of a particular wording, and it seemed to me to be quite clear to say it cannot be said its view, it cannot be said that vaccines do not cause autism because no studies have shown that it does not cause autism. Now, as I mentioned previously in my response to the question by Senator Antic, there is a fundamental scientific challenge in stating that something exists because you haven't been able to prove that it doesn't. So the scientific process is an individual or a party that makes a scientific claim holds the onus to provide the evidence that that claim is supported. For instance, if you're claiming that vaccines cause autism, the obligation is on you or another person who's claiming that to demonstrate the evidence that supports that claim. The challenge that we have in that space is that a significant amount of the initial conversation around vaccines causing autism arose from a 1997 article by a then doctor, Andrew Wakefield, that was published in The Lancet and subsequently retracted and thoroughly debunked because there was personal, professional, ethical and methodological conflicts and flaws. And since then, there have been multiple studies over decades involving millions of children and adults who have received different types of vaccines over different years. And in that time, there has been no demonstrated causal or associative link between vaccines and autism. So as I say, if there is a claim there, it has never been substantiated by rigorous and dependable evidence. And all of the evidence that we have is supportive of the view that there is no link between vaccines and autism.
In my view, and I think this is probably correct, the approver has the onus to say something's safe. The approver, that's you, the TGA.
That's
According to FOI 1345-01, you have 43 sudden unexpected deaths reported on your adverse event management system following injection of Infantrix Hexa vaccine. Are none of those caused by the vaccine?
So I don't know whether Tali Fenner is here, is that? That's Dan. Okay. So I'll throw to Dr. Dascombe, who's online, to respond to that. I will just say initially, as I have said in response to your questions and the questions of others, and indeed in the conversation that we had previously this evening around mesh, the role of the regulator is to ensure that the risks are managed appropriately such that there is an effective balance for the community between access to a therapeutic product and the benefit that derives from that product and the risk that's presented. And as we've discussed on a number of occasions, overwhelmingly for the COVID vaccine and for other vaccines, the risk-benefit profile is overwhelmingly positive. But Dr. Dascombe, I'll ask you to respond as well.
Thank you, Professor Lawler, and thank you, Senator, for your question. Dr. Daniel Dascombe, Acting Principal Medical Advisor in the Pharmacovigilance Branch at the TGA. To go to sort of both of your questions there, Senator, I mean, Professor Lawler has comprehensively answered on two occasions now tonight, questions around the updated guidance from the US CDC. But I think a couple of things that I'd just reaffirm there, particularly from a post-market regulation of vaccines perspective. The TGA, like our international counterparts, takes an evidence-based approach to the regulation of vaccines registered in Australia. This means that our regulatory decisions are based on the weight of available scientific evidence. And a couple of, I think, key points worth confirming. There is no scientific evidence of a causal link between autism and any vaccine or vaccine ingredient. There is a substantial body of scientific evidence to refute the claim that vaccines are linked to autism. Neither the TGA nor any international regulator has detected nor confirmed a safety signal for autism in any vaccine. Those are, I think, key points to reiterate to your first question. To your second question, I think around reported adverse events with the Infantrix Hexa vaccine on our adverse event management system. As you know, Senator, this is a system that relies on spontaneous reports from healthcare professionals, consumers, healthcare, state public health units and medicine sponsors. Reports on there don't necessarily sort of, the existence of a report in that system and a report made to us doesn't confirm that the vaccine has caused that death. We encourage reporting of all adverse events, even if there's only a small chance that that vaccine has been related to that death.
Thank you.
Sorry, and thank you for that, Dr. Dascombe. I just would also just reflect on your comment earlier around the onus on the approver to ensure that something is safe. That is correct. The challenge that every regulator faces in the world is that the only way to ensure that there is no risk in a product is to not approve any product for supply in the country. So that's the only way, and then public would be quite rightly clamouring for access to goods that are enjoyed by populations around the world. So the role of the regulator here in Australia, as in other countries, is to appropriately assure itself that the evidence indicates that the risk-benefit profile is positive, and as Dr Dascombe's indicated, there's no identified causal link between vaccines and autism.
I'll take you back to, oh, you weren't here, sorry, but Professor Skerritt. I asked him a question about the testing of the COVID Pfizer shots in Australia. He said, oh, no, we didn't do any testing. We relied upon the FDA in America. And at that time, it had already been stated prior to that the FDA did no testing itself and relied on Pfizer. And Pfizer cut short its trials because of the number of people who died. So we had a failed study that led to the approval of vaccines, or COVID injections in this country. And no one knew about it. Yet it was open public knowledge in the United States. That was... So let me continue. Yep. A Korean study published in Biomarker Research in September this year followed up 8.4 million Koreans and found as follows. Within a 12-month period following their COVID jab, the vaccinated group had a 27% greater chance of being diagnosed in that 12-month period with cancer when compared to an unvaccinated group. This was a massive study. And this does not prove causation, although many studies I've shared with you prove how these products cause cancer. It does prove correlation. Do you still maintain that COVID vaccines are safe?
So I do not recall, Senator, an article that you shared with me that does prove causation between these vaccines and cancer. And also, given the need to analyse the documents, I don't have the article that you're describing in front of me, so I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on it specifically.
Okay, I'll check that. On November 28, 2025, Dr. Vinay Prasad, Director of the FDA's, American FDA's Centre for Biologics Evaluation and Research, sent an email first reported by the New York Times, described findings from a recent internal FDA review of paediatric deaths reported to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, between 2021 and 2024. According to the memo, an analysis of 96 reported paediatric deaths ages 7 to 18 concluded that at least 10 were causally linked to COVID-19 vaccines, primarily due to vaccine-induced myocarditis. Prasad described this as a profound revelation. Professor Kidd, do you acknowledge that paediatric vaccines can cause death?
I'm going to have to take that on notice.
You can't acknowledge it, or you can?
I'm going to take it on notice.
The FDA announced...
I'm happy to provide some comment on that if you like, Senator. We did respond to questions around Dr Prasad's announcement earlier this evening when questioned by Senator Antic. We have not, as far as I'm aware, and Dr Dascombe, please feel free to correct me, we've not at this stage been provided with information regarding that. As we have indicated previously, we rely not only on our own information that comes through our own adverse event monitoring system, but also on signals that come from other regulators. This is not a signal that's been replicated, to my knowledge, in other regulators. And as I say, we have not had detailed information regarding Dr Prasad's claim shared with us. In terms of the question that you posed to Professor Kidd, one of the reasons we have robust post-market vigilance in place for medicines, devices and in fact all therapeutic goods that we regulate is because that we recognise that individuals sometimes react to medicines. I mean, if I give you an example, we have a number of other medicines, non-vaccine medicines, to which individuals can have allergic reactions. So it would be inappropriate of I think, either Professor Kidd or myself to say that people can't react to these things. Our role as the regulator is to ensure that appropriate systems are in place to identify safety signals as they arise, to analyse them, to understand them and to respond to them in an appropriate way.
Thank you.
Senator Roberts, I'm just checking
I've just got
how
two
much-
more.
Two more?
Yep.
And then you're done completely?
Yes.
Okay.
For now.
Thank you.
The FDA announced immediate and sweeping reforms to their vaccine approval and monitoring processes. including stricter clinical trials, restrictions on high-risk groups such as pregnant women, and an overhaul of the vaccine safety monitoring system. This is going on under a new administration. These reforms closely mirror measures which operated in Australia until COVID, when our safety assessments and monitoring were watered down with fast-track approval and emergency use authorisation for a multitude of drugs. Will you accept weak approval processes, high adverse events and blanket denials? Anything is wrong has undermined confidence in the entire health system in this country.
So there are a couple of things there, if I might comment, Senator. We didn't use emergency use authorisation. We adopted what is called a provisional approval pathway.
Yeah. Equivalent.
It's not equivalent. It's quite different. And the reason that we undertook that was because, like the rest of the world, we recognised that that there were risks that the community was facing, and we worked very closely with other regulators to understand what was emerging. You've mentioned already previously tonight about relying on the FDA. It's really important when we talk about reliance, that's a specific term. It's not like if the FDA has approved it, then we automatically register it.
I'm just using Professor Skerritt's words.
I'm trying to explain. I wasn't here when Professor Skerritt gave you those words. I'm just trying to explain where we're at.
He said he didn't do any testing here.
Senator Roberts, can we let Professor Lawler finish his answer, please?
And it's not like if the FDA hasn't approved it, we say you shall not pass. What happens is that we look to the information that other regulators have in making our own decisions. I think the important thing as well to note is that we do very much rely on our approvals. We do have, as other regulators do, both pre-market and post-market evaluation and monitoring. But the point that you made around trust is a very important one. We had a presentation at our International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities earlier this year around trust. And there's a very strong driver of trust in institutions, in regulations and health professionals. And the very strong downward driver of that is misinformation and disinformation. And part of the challenge that we have is, as we hear very frequently, there are a lot of studies, for instance, of very low quality that are being taken up and used as evidence or proof of causal links that just do not exist. And I think part of the challenge we have is that we do strive to rebuild trust. On 2 occasions in the last 2 months, the Chief Medical Officer and I have endeavoured to do that through public statement, and it is a constant battle.
Well, it's something we've found an agreement on, because I understand there's been a paper in Lancet a few years ago that says 50% of medical papers are not valid. And now we've got increasing knowledge coming out, evidence showing that Big Pharma has influenced heavily the scientific papers and corruptly done so. Last question, Chair. Will you monitor these changes in the United States in case the new team under Kennedy is actually right about what has gone before them and right about these changes being necessary?
We monitor all of the developments by our international collaborative partners in regulation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Little.
Thank you. I'll just tell you what the 2 questions are so the officials can make their way. One is about self-harm and suicide, and the other one is about FASD. So if you can get those people here, we can probably get out of here quicker. Thank you. I'm interested in understanding where is the most accurate, timely record about self-harm in Australia amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
It would be there's the self-harm and suicide. It would be probably the causes of death data, and probably the latest release of that would be the most accurate, source of information.
It's really the self-harm.
The self-harm part, I think also there is a data source that we use for self-harm. I forgot the name of it, but I think there is a source of information we use from sort of hospitals and others in terms of reporting self-harm, which is sort of usually reported through hospital systems and others.
So is that publicly available data? Like, could you point me to where that actually is?
It would be data. Yeah, there is publicly available data on it, Senator, I understand. So, yes, we can give you a link to that data.
If you could give me a link, that would be helpful. Thank you. And as you already know, sadly, suicide is one of the targets going in the wrong direction.
Yep.
Are you able to break this data down by state and territory and by age? Because that information is actually not on the Productivity Commission.
No, it probably won't be on the Productivity Commission website, but it would be through from the causes of death data. So yes, we can break it down definitely by age categories. For there, that we can get you a table on that. I'm pretty sure it is broken down by states and territories as well.
That would be helpful because finding that is...
Yeah, it'd be easy to do on a table. Yeah,
Thank you.
from the
Thank
AHW.
you.
So I mean, I've probably got it somewhere, but it'd take a while to read out all the numbers, but we can give you a table.
If you could just flick it across, that'd be great.
Sure.
And thank you, that's done for that one. I've just got a question about FASD. As you know, the Child and Youth Assessment and Treatment Service in Central Australia, run by Congress, was given a significant amount of money to address assessments requirements in Central Australia for FASD. We know that in the early phases of that, they were quite significantly behind their expectations in terms of the amount of screening that they were actually able to do, and we heard reasons for that. Are you able to give us an update on where they are now?
Trish Clancy, First Assistant Secretary, Population Health Division. Excuse me, Senator. I'm afraid I do not have that information here, but I can get it for you on notice.
Thank you, that would be helpful. And given the proliferation of FASD, one of the highest in the world, in the Kimberley, are there any plans to look at a contribution of a similar nature, because that was a significant amount of money? It was 18.4 million over 4 years for the Kimberley in Western Australia?
I would need to call on my colleagues from the First Nations Health Division.
Right. So I'm interested to understand if there are any plans afoot, given that the evidence has been around for a very long time.
Hi, Senator. So the program you're referring to was funded under the Central Australia Plan. So there are no plans to extend that out further at this point in time, and not to Western Australia as far as we're aware.
Right. Okay. So I have a question about obviously the assessments that are being done by Congress are the traditional clinical assessments. Yep. They're very expensive. They take quite a while. Is there any work being done to actually have a look at other versions of assessment that can get a response to children quicker in their early childhood development, given that developmental delays is actually also a target going in the wrong direction, such as the tracking cube, which actually has been developed with a university, has been trialled extensively, is much cheaper and can be delivered a lot more simply in regional areas than the traditional methodologies.
Thanks for the question, Senator. Thomas Lester, Assistant Secretary, First Nations Health Division. We might have to take that one on notice. I can provide you some information about the other tracking tools that we have been discussing and having open conversations with the sector about this. But if possible, I'd like to provide you with that on notice to give you a more detailed answer.
Okay, that would be terrific. I'm really just trying to understand what other work is being done to try and get to these children earlier, rather than large amounts of money through a single program. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. That concludes today's hearing. Thank you to all the witnesses who have appeared and to Hansard and Broadcasting for their assistance.
I remind senators that the committee has agreed to any written questions on notice and that should be lodged with the Secretariat by Thursday, the 11th of December 2025, and that answers to questions on notice are due by Thursday, the 29th of January 2026. We release all witnesses from outcome 1 of health policy, access and support and cross-portfolio Indigenous matters. The committee now stands adjourned.